Budget and CIP Work Session. It's Monday, December 9th, 2024, and we are in the Town Hall chambers. I call this meeting to order, and let's do a roll call. And Councillor Friedrichs is traveling, is going to try to join us by Zoom. We just need a yes, that's fine, or no, it's not fine, with the council. So if you can do your name and aye or nay. And I'm going to say I'm Sally Nadell. Aye.
Joe Friedman, aye.
Eric Lund, aye.
Darrell Ford, aye.
Curtis Reister, aye.
Heather Grant, aye.
James Bubar, aye.
Move that we approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
Is there a second? Councillor Ford, okay. And that's procedural, and we don't have anybody on Zoom quite yet. So all those in favor? All those opposed? Good to go? All right. Public comments. So public comments tonight, anyone who'd like to speak should be focused on budget items that we'll be discussing tonight. If there's anyone who would like to come up, you have 5 minutes, name and address, be great. Any takers? Anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Beth Olshansky has her hand up.
Okay. Beth, you're on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm here this evening because I just wanted to reflect back that on November 18th, I was so moved by all the people who spoke in support of the Bickford Chesley House project. There was Katie Wheeler, who reminded us of its statewide significance and our obligation as a community to make sure that building doesn't disintegrate to nothing and to use that building the way the voters intended it. Kay Morgan, Doug Cairo, Kay Morgan, founding member of the Community Gardens, Doug Cairo, Durham Historical Association, reminding us of its importance as a historical resource. Charlotte Hitchcock, Vice Chair of the Heritage Committee. Robert Chase, who grew up in Durham and lives far away now, but has spent the last 50 years working on historical preservation in our state and just reminding us what a gem we have. And it is just such a shame that we have not yet taken care of it. Marjorie Smith, David Moore, John Parsons, Robin Mower, Joshua Meyerowitz, and in the audience, Nancy Sandberg, Dudley Dudley, Janet Mackey. These people are the powerhouses and the engines that have shaped our community over the last 50 years. I really hope that the council will take a step back and just remember, number one, that we got the LCHIP grant because this is a project of statewide significance, and that we have an obligation to use that money that other councils had supported in the past, and that even if we just decide to go with option 2 in order to move forward with the grant and recognize the value of not only the honor of a town receiving that money, an LCHIP grant, but also fulfilling our commitment, at least at the bottom level, that we need to do in order to use that money. So I think it could be an incredible resource for the community, not only all of us who care about history because we've lived it, but to remind our children in the community about where they come from as we get more and more captivated by technology. So important to remind our kids about our past and where their roots came from as well. And so I hope you will consider this when you vote tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Anyone else?
No one else has their hand up on Zoom.
Okay. So we have well, obviously, we're moving on to our discussion, tonight's work session, to make decisions about the town budget. And I think to make the best use of our time, if people have questions, we have the fire department here, and we have on Zoom, we have Rich Rain, so if we have questions, for those departments, now would be a good time to ask those questions. And then we'll save discussion in terms of the specific items, and hope that you will present them as motions that we can second, discuss, and then vote upon. Yes?
How much over the town's goal that was set last May is the current proposed budget?
4.3?
Yeah, I think I'm looking to Gail, I think it was, Gail, $460-something thousand dollars? Is
Right,
that
$468,000.
460? Okay.
Was
That was before the in and out of the 20,000? Was that an even wash and there's been no other adjustments since then?
There have been no other adjustments since then. The additional revenue is 25,000. The additional expense was, I think, $20,530.
Right.
So it's
463
yeah.
then, approximately.
Right.
$463,000 approximately.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And so, our goal tonight is to try to make motions that have to do with any amendments that we want to make to the budget. In an ideal world, then on the 16th, we have a completed budget that we can approve and see. Traditionally, the council then doesn't make a decision until they see sort of everything in print. How would you describe that? Or the final numbers?
So the hope is that we'll be able to basically whittle down where you want things, either through a bottom line or specific line item reductions or increases.
Yes.
And then we'll take that information and put it into the formal resolution that the council would use to act upon the budget, and we'd bring that forward for unanimous consent vote at the following meeting, so next Monday on the 16th.
However, if we don't finish what we're doing tonight, then we would continue that on the 16th,
Yes.
and we might need to schedule an additional meeting.
Potentially, yes, if we're not able to get through that night.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
May I make a suggestion / request in regards to if we succeed tonight and we get a relative consensus on where we're headed for the 16th, that the presentation of the adjusted budget be more of a one-slider with what originally was proposed and what is changed and where that total falls out. Because I love what we've got going here, because I think that has a lot of details that we can noodle on and ask questions. But I think for decision making, it's a little overwhelming, especially when we're trying to move forward. And so I think if we could have a one slider, whether it's a spreadsheet or a
just
PowerPoint or whatever,
page,
just say, hey,
additions,
this is what each
subtractions,
department
boom.
has, what was proposed, what is now being recommended, and what the end state of that looks like. I think that would help make us make that decision a little bit more quickly.
Right, and that's why we can't really do that until we've done all the amendments.
Absolutely.
And all of them, so that we feel like we've done all those parts.
Of course.
Yes, absolutely. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have the fire department with us. So Chief Emmanuel is back. We had such a late meeting last time, we didn't have time to get through everything.
I'm happy to come back.
Good.
My name's Dave Emanuel. I serve as chief of your fire department. I am joined this evening by Assistant Chief Randall Troll, Deputy Robert Atwater, Fire Marshal Brendan O'Sullivan, Captain James Brown, and Firefighter Blatchford. And the captains and firefighters are both active with their collective bargaining agreements, with their collective bargaining units.
Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you.
Yeah, so what questions do councilors have regarding the fire department? And that could be operational budget items or items in the capital budget. Could be either or. And we have gotten some written queries over the last few weeks, and we followed up with those one by one. But if there are other things, we wanted to make sure the department staff was here to answer your questions.
Yeah.
I think during the review of the budget last month or whenever it was, we sat just as a round table, it sat in on your discussions. You had talked a lot about the new uniforms being required with the PFAS situation and new rulings coming in through. Is that still that extra clothing still in the budget? And is there more update that shows that would be in effect in 2025?
That is included in our suppression, in our clothing allowance line under the suppression area. Yes, to help us with it. The legislation is effective in January. We're not supposed to buy uniform garments that are treated with PFAS, and in July 1, we're not supposed to wear them anymore.
And there was no clarification on enforcement of that requirement, correct?
That is correct.
And you didn't know even how to, do we have the available clothing in the marketplace to purchase that you're aware, that I think last time you were a little confused about even how
Yes.
that avenue of purchasing would go?
There's two different lines. The uniform and apparel line is mostly focused on the trousers that we wear every day, the blue uniform pants. And the New Hampshire fire chiefs, professional firefighters in New Hampshire, a number of organizations have done research, and we know that there are viable options for non-treated trousers for us to wear. On the protective ensembles, or the fire gear is still a different animal. That is still in process right now. But that is not, we did not allocate money specific to replace that gear in '25. We're just working on a normal rotation cycle.
Okay, all right.
So we do have money to purchase PPE in '25, but it's on part of our normal cycle.
Got it, okay.
And so that is only because of the PFAS requirement that you're pushing it towards purchasing new uniform items that are PFAS related. You are doing a normal rotation of your dudes need new PPE and new uniform items, and trying to get ahead of the curve of the requirement, you're going ahead and planning the purchase of PFAS-free materials that still support and protect our firefighters adequately, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
but just being clear that we put a special line in for uniforms on this one, not the protective ensembles. A protective ensemble, there are two pieces of legislation, and I think we have between 5 and 10 years, we have 5 years before we have to be actively working on the protective ensembles. Not that we plan on waiting for 5 years, but a set of gear is good for 10, and we try to replace 5 sets a year, so we're not coming here asking for a full replacement.
But the firefighters need new uniforms regardless of PFAS.
That's,
Yes, we wear through uniforms regularly. Yes, sorry. That's correct.
Yeah.
The extraction equipment is in the budget for $80,000 for this year. I understand is based to go in a piece of equipment, a vehicle that's been ordered. Is that vehicle going to be delivered in 2025?
I don't have a definitive delivery date, and just to clarify, we're talking about the rescue tools, the hydraulic rescue tools for $80,000 to be placed on our rescue truck that we ordered a year and a half ago. Joe, I don't have a tight time frame on when that apparatus will be delivered, but ideally, they would go into service when the next apparatus comes. The whole, sorry.
Well, just, my understanding is that the truck we've spec'd out would be built in a certain way to accommodate the specific extraction equipment, right? And so I think the relevance of the question is if there's going to be a delay in the delivery time of the vehicle, perhaps we could delay the purchase of the extraction equipment. The only challenge is, I'd hate to get into a situation in some way similar to the Wagon Hill farmhouse conversation, where one council makes a decision and then a future council decides not to fund particular equipment or the same kind of equipment for a cost savings. And then we have a mismatch between the equipment and the truck. So if we do it all at once, we know it's all going to mesh when it comes in. That was the thinking behind this.
And Joe, the difference, or for the rest of the council, what the equipment we're speaking about is battery-powered, single-functioning units. Like each tool stands alone. What we have right now, there's a hydraulic hose reel that goes from each tool back to the truck on a reel and then down to either a PTO-driven or a gas-powered hydraulic generator. So, or hydraulic pump. So the new tools don't have anything behind it. It's literally like a cordless tool that you'd have at your house.
Nice.
So it is nice, and it gives us a lot more freedom and liberty to work anywhere without being encumbered or hindered by the hoses. However, what Todd's speaking about is the configuration of the vehicle or the apparatus. We haven't designed it for hydraulic hose reels and hydraulic pumps. It's designed to just hold the tools.
And,
Yes.
and the other nuance is that the funding for this piece of equipment is coming from the Fire Department and Capital Reserve Fund. So the money's already in that fund and so the purchase does not impact the tax rate because the funds are already in the bank, so to speak. Where it could potentially help with the tax rate is if we defer this purchase, then I would look at the town not allocating a total of $50,000 to slowly replenish the fund. And that's funded 50% by Durham, 50% by UNH. So if we didn't purchase this piece of equipment, we could pull back a little on replenishing the fund. So that's how it might help the tax rate. But it wouldn't be the full $80,000 in savings. It would be basically $25,000, but still savings.
Is this a cost that is shared with UNH, the extraction equipment?
Yes. Our full operating budget and capital budgets are both covered by the fire service agreement with the university, and they pay 50% of everything we have.
Is it 50% of this 80, or is 80 Durham's share?
No, the Fire Department Capital Reserve account, all the monies in there were contributed 50% by UNH, 50% by Durham. In essence, the money gets contributed if we underexpend the bottom line in the fire department, any surplus up to a certain percentage gets washed into that account. And so the fire department's already funded 50-50 by UNH. And the annual contribution that ideally we target $100,000 a year, some years it's zero, some years it's 50,000, but whatever that number is, half is funded by UNH. So UNH contributes their half.
Thank you.
And I had a note from Captain Brown that we're anticipating the delivery date of the rescue at the end of 2025, but it could be delayed until the spring of 26. So we're right on the bubble is the best information we have.
Yes?
I have two questions, Chief. Have you found a successful replacement for the Exeter medical program that was discontinued? And is that actually even, that wasn't even in the budget, is it?
No, and I don't recall the last time the Exeter paramedics actually came to Durham. It's been a number of years. Our contract with...
No, I thought it was the medical checkups that Exeter was doing.
I'm sorry.
That's what I meant.
I understand. No, we're still working on that. I know that DPW is contracted with a vendor, and that vendor doesn't service our needs on the fire department physicals yet. So we're still, the hazardous materials team is moving in one direction for the mutual aid district, and my intent was to try to follow them, but I haven't been able to speak with anyone yet in process.
And then we had some back and forth on the training issue. Are you satisfied with the 2025 budget for training and that it'll provide what the firefighters really need to be in the field?
I am,
Okay.
and I
Thank you.
appreciate your consideration.
Well,
Uh,
we all want them to come home at night.
yeah. Councilor Ford?
Yeah, I have a question on the equipment for the new apparatus. What's the lead time on that?
That's a great question.
I mean, if a lead time's a week, then that's one thing. If it's 6 months, then that's another.
Yeah, I can't answer that, but I can tell you we'll work with the vendors to determine that. So we would have, our goal would be to have it here well before, while they're doing the build out of the apparatus. So they can physically take that equipment and fit it and mount it if that's how the manufacturer and representatives want to work with it.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking of it more along the lines of, if it's a short lead time, then putting it off isn't a big deal. If it's a long lead time, putting it off is a big deal.
I guess I can check. I haven't, and you guys up on hydraulic rescue equipment lead time? Yeah. Yeah,
Okay. Thanks.
I don't believe it's as bad as vehicles, but I can't, it's been, oh, sorry.
Okay.
If I was to guess, I'd probably guess maybe a couple months.
Chief Troll said 2-month range.
But in general, we should think positively that the vehicle would come in by December of 2025.
Yes.
I mean, we can't just assume it might slip.
And we're working with a good manufacturer who has manufactured 2 of our engines, our current rescue and our tanker. So we have an excellent working relationship with the vendor.
There may be disruptions in the supply chain coming for vehicle manufacturers.
Yeah.
Well,
Thanks.
and others if the parts come from overseas.
Well,
I mean, in the electrical switchgear department, I mean, that's like a year or a year and a half for generators and basic electrical equipment, so it would be interesting to know how long.
And I'm not sure what you can really do about it, other than be prepared not to get what you think you're gonna get, when you think you're gonna get it.
yeah.
You
No,
gotta
I-
take care of your gear, but yeah.
You're right on point, because when we had talked about small vehicles, our small vehicles, the past 2 staff cars that we've purchased have taken close to a year to get. And because of some of the other things you're speaking about, it takes another 4 to 6 months to fit it up. So even if we order a staff vehicle in January, we may or may not see it in '25.
Question, and I think maybe sort of brought this up at the last meeting, maybe towards the end of the meeting. I think the point about training is an important one, but one of the things that got in the way of having that training money this year was needing to use overtime, pay for overtime for your firefighters. So does hiring one additional firefighter, or, would that help protect that training money so it doesn't end up needing to be spent on overtime?
It's an excellent question. We have had a number of conversations with our staff about the best way to phase that in, or there is, in my opinion, there's not there's no one way to hire or bring up one additional person per shift. One of the constraints we have is the schedule of our firefighters as part of the collective bargaining agreement with the Firefighters Association. So their schedule is fixed in the contract for, their work hours are fixed. So in some areas of employment, you might be able to hire one person and use them wherever you need to. We don't have that luxury at this time with our labor agreements. So it would reduce potential, you could have a cost savings on overtime on the 1 of the 4 shifts. By having a +1 position, if hire one and we drop to our current staffing level when someone is absent or vacant. So it definitely would have an impact. Our challenge has been, how close can you balance it? So across one shift, it would be 25% of one shift in the fire department. Does that answer your question?
Well, it just points out how challenging it would be to add only one of your staff instead of someone for each one of the teams.
How does Madbury fit in?
That's another great question, Counselor. I've reached out to the Madbury Fire Chief to see if Administrator Seliger or I could answer any questions or provide any additional information or work with them. I have not spoken with them for over a week, and I don't know how much we want to say, what's appropriate to say about our proposal.
I don't think you could describe the proposal in general. That's fair. It's a public document.
We have offered to collaborate with the town of Madbury and to respond from the Durham Fire Station to fire and EMS calls in their town. Our request was for a training position, or our request was what we had put forward to the council, a training chief to help train the Madbury Fire Department. We looked at exploring options with the Madbury Fire Department and our call department or our part-timers to try to put a larger mass together that we could train, equip, and use as a hiring pool for candidates for us to onboard to career positions. And we proposed to increase our staff by one person per shift with the goal to be we could send a piece of apparatus with 3 people to Madbury while retaining a piece of apparatus and 3 people here in Durham to maintain our base. This is, right now, is a one-sided proposal. I mean, we had worked with the town of Madbury on it as we constructed it. However, we have not, I've told UNH that we're working on this, but we haven't gone any further until we know what Madbury's interest level is.
And there may be, not that I've done this exact thing, but I've worked where you absolve or work with folks with lower training standards integrating with a higher training standard organization. And the higher training standard organization will slow down and will take more time to catch these guys up to speed. There'll be more problems, there'll be more need for efficiencies that could potentially cost more revenue. And so I think it might be a good idea to engage with UNH and see if they can help offset that cost when it does decide to show its head, because if we want to have the same quality capability that we have currently, when you mesh, I mean, it's just like when you blend anything, you're gonna have a little dissolvement going in there. And so they'll get up to speed, but as the training standards start to stick, you're gonna lose volunteers because they're gonna decide that this isn't actually what they want. You're gonna get other guys that are getting excited because they finally get in some direction and getting to feel like a real firefighter. But that's gonna cause vacancies, it's gonna cause turnover, frustration, friction points, and it's gonna be hard for the firefighters to work with. But I expect they're up to the challenge, and I also expect that it's a good long-term investment after we work the kinks out of the personality conflicts and the expectation mismanagement. I would say in the next year, we'll start to see, 2026, we would start to see positivity if what I'm understanding with the merger works.
And presumably, if this merger goes through, Madbury would be paying a share of the fire department expenses. Has there been any discussion about what that share would be?
Yeah, at this point, the contribution we've suggested from Madbury would be covering the cost of 4 additional full-time firefighters, 1 per shift, and covering the additional cost of this assistant chief training person who would deal with the training side.
That's in addition to our budget, is that correct?
That's in addition. And so,
That's good.
so none of that is included in what is before us tonight with the proposed budget.
Cool.
Because it's so variable, we just
Of
don't know
course.
how it's going to play out. But if there was interest on the part of Madbury, then we need to come back to the council to talk about it. There'd have to be an intermunicipal agreement between Durham and Madbury. So we'd have to bring that to the council and have you consider it and approve it. And we'd also need to do a budget adjustment, which can be done after the new year, following a public hearing, as long as there's offsetting revenue. And the offsetting revenue would be payments from Madbury.
Wouldn't UNH also have to agree with this?
Yes,
I mean, it would really be a 3-party.
well, it's the Durham Fire Department, it's not the UNH Fire Department. So it's Durham and Madbury that would sign the intermunicipal agreement, but we would ensure that UNH was 100% comfortable with this
Okay.
before doing that. But we haven't, other than letting UNH generally know we're having conversations with Madbury, we haven't broached the topic because we just don't know what it is we're broaching yet. So our hope is Madbury will be interested, but Madbury's talking with Dover as well. So we're not sure how.
Oh, so we don't even know this is the plan yet?
No, we
That's
don't.
kind of frustrating.
We don't. And
Yeah.
what would be helpful longer term is, if we were envisioning a 3-year arrangement where we sort of see how it works, make sure everyone's comfortable with it, work out any glitches or bugs, and then if everyone was comfortable after 3 years, entering into a longer term arrangement. But as part of the longer term arrangement, we would envision in some way utilizing the current Madbury Fire Department facility, in which case, at such time, we need to build a new fire department. By having a second station, we could build a smaller fire department, which would be a benefit to Durham taxpayers as well. So it's not, at this point, we're not envisioning a cost sharing of the department as a whole. I forget who asked that, I'm sorry, I lost track.
Eric asked it.
Okay. Eric, yes.
Yeah.
But rather financial contribution toward specific additional services. That would help Durham and help Madbury. You know, it would be a benefit to Durham to have a 6-person fire shift as well. And the majority of the calls are to Durham. They won't be to Madbury. We envision Madbury has about 200 calls a year. We have over 2,000.
We did just under 2,600 in
2,600 calls a year.
2023.
So,
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to further that, we had also proposed a phased proposal like Councilman Udell's asked about, with a deputy and 2 firefighters in year 1 and firefighter 3 and 4 in year 2. So, you know, by the end of year 3, would be running with a full complement. And also with the assumption that if we are going to hire the readily available resources right now to balance us out, it may take 6 months to send them to the fire academy to get their professional certifications and skills, because there are not, the general rule right now is there are not a lot of applicants doing lateral transfers. So we may be hiring, and we haven't done this during my tenure here. We've always had either volunteers around us or people come in that have come in with their Fire 1, Fire 2, EMT, EMT Advanced or EMT Paramedic. So, you know, we're in uncharted waters on this, but we're just trying to brace for that. And it's important in the conversations we're having, because if you have a +1 situation where you can drop a person and still maintain a minimum staffing level, you can do it with 0 overtime cost. If you have to pay somebody to sit in the seat while this person goes to school, we're paying a full-time wage plus a time-and-a-half wage to train them up, which is prohibitively expensive. I should say that it's a very different model than what we've done before. That's where the +1 on our staff really makes a difference. And that's whether we're hiring for Madbury or just replacing our people right now. I'm not sure who the next 2 Durham firefighters will be right now.
So are you suggesting that what works best is two in 2025 and 2 in 2026, just to get your full complement?
That
To
would,
spread it out.
that would be an effective way to
And
onboard.
and effectively, Durham is effectively paying one salary because UNH is paying the other one.
Yes. That would be an effective way of spreading the costs across multiple years.
Yeah.
but just to make it simple, what's in the proposed budget is status quo.
Right.
It does not include Madbury, and it does not include additional people. It's just status quo.
Right.
Thank you for that clarification.
Right, because presumably if the talks with Madbury do not come to fruition, then we would not need the additional people.
Well, I think,
Or at least not for the purposes of serving Madbury.
Right.
agreed, not for the purposes of serving Madbury.
Okay. And last year, we spent $183,000 or something like that on overtime?
It was a big ticket. That was the number that we had put together in long-term injuries, not in overtime. We're going to end up
Okay.
spending between $530,000 and $550,000 in overtime. 183 was directly related to our long-term injuries this fall, or this past spring.
I could add something to that. This is a source of pride for us, I think, to take into account. Is I talked to one of the firefighters that had just returned to full duty after spending an extended duration on injury, and he had nothing but positive things to say about how Durham took care of him while he was on his disability. And I find that refreshing, particularly in a time that seems to look at every opportunity to cut costs. I'm very grateful that we have a town that takes care of our firefighters who sacrifice their literal body to keep us safe. And so I think that's a source of pride that we should keep into our psyche as we're going forward with this, that we have taken care of and should continue to take care of our firefighters, because I think it helps with retention and it helps with motivation of those that want to serve the community.
And ultimately, maybe protects that training
And
opportunity.
short term, protects that training.
And it's the way that of having a +1 on each shift also provides us the opportunity to send somebody away for training without an overtime expense to cover them as well. So it's not quite as simple and black and white as saying everything, this is what it all is. Each one of the different variables and options has another side effect or offshoot that goes directly to our bottom line and how we spend the town's money.
Okay. I had some questions on the capital improvement program. On the kitchen renovations, I think that one was resolved when I attended the session on the UNH master plan, which what I took away from that is the fire station was in the group of buildings that they don't expect to get to until 2034, in which case I would have no objection to refurbishing the kitchen in 2026, because that bond will be paid off well before they start building the new fire station. The other two questions that I had was whether it would be feasible to defer a couple of vehicle purchases. There's there was an item to replace a 2016 Chevrolet Tahoe in 2025 and a 2017 Ford Explorer in 2026. And my question was about whether it would make sense to defer each of those a year. It was pointed out that the consequence would be a certain amount of maintenance to pay for the existing vehicles. So what's your opinion regarding that trade-off?
If I were tight and understood the supply chain that we could replace them in a pre-COVID replacement cycle, I would tell you I wouldn't be concerned at all. But when it takes between 12 and 18 months to get a vehicle, to acquire a vehicle at state pricing, and then outfit it with the electronics to make it work for our purpose, that's my concern. You know,
Right, yes, it is a valid concern. So I think it does make sense to keep this in the queue, and then we actually pay for it when it comes in. That would be both of the vehicles that I was referring to. And I believe that was all of the outstanding questions that I had on the fire department.
Thank you for your consideration.
Oh, okay.
I just one other question about the Madbury venture. There's an item in this year's budget for additional rent for more space. Is there facilities involved in the Madbury thing? You wouldn't move, I doubt you would move a piece of equipment to a bigger space. Would you move operations if Madbury had some space available?
Possibly in the long term, but in the short term, the additional 2,000 square feet of space that we were looking at is adjacent to the administrative suite in the fire station right now. So it's above the UNH wood shop. And the reason we were looking for that space is because if we were going to accommodate, well, first of all, the space has been vacant or they would say underutilized. I should say vacant. Please strike that from the record. The space has been underutilized, and we were looking for a win-win with the university. The conversations I've had with the campus architect and planner and facilities division, as UNH changes their space allocations on the campus, there are a number of units that are looking to relocate back to the campus in that size space. So the reason we were looking for adjacent space is because if we're going to have an additional bunk or two, we need to rejigger our space in the fire station. And the easiest way to do that is to bump down the hallway further. Just shift our offices down and create a new bunk room adjacent to the existing bunk rooms. So, what am I trying to say? It's timely because no one's in the space right now and it's available. You know, the first 30 years I was here, we tried to get the sponsored research or any additional space in the building, and we were completely unsuccessful with that. So these spaces don't open frequently, and to have it this close to our operation is important.
I would, if nothing proceeds with Madbury, are there other uses you could foresee that would benefit the fire department for that space, given the cramped nature of the facility and the fact that it's going to be at least 10 years until we get a new facility?
Absolutely, yes. And yes, is the short answer.
Yes.
I think I lost track. Where did we end up on the ladder truck that took the little trip to Lewis or Auburn?
Yeah, the ladder truck that took the trip went up. We figured out the repairs required were much more extensive than they had initially anticipated, and it took the trip back to Durham, and it's sitting in the fire station out of service.
But is it usable?
Not right now, it's not, no.
So what is that, what's the implication of that?
We will solicit an aerial device from an adjacent community or communities around us to service our taller buildings at this time. And I am working with the town administrator on the best way to reallocate or allocate funding to make that repair.
Okay.
Right, and the contingency funding for doing that repair does exist?
Yes, if needed, yes, we'll find that money. It would be a good use of the town contingency account. It's for things just like this, large pieces of equipment that unexpectedly have a huge problem. So,
Does UNH have a contingency account?
well, again, if we need to amend the fire department budget, we can do that up to a certain percentage of the budget. Is it looking to Gail, per our agreement, and UNH would be obligated to share in the cost. So UNH will share in the cost.
They should, whether they do is another question.
Well, they're obligated to under the MOU.
Yeah.
So.
So it's a little more binding than please and thank you is what you're saying? Cool.
Brad seemed like a really nice guy last week. Come on, you guys.
Yeah, and we look first to, at this year's budget, and if there's unused money, we could encumber that if the repair can't be made until next year. So this is like breaking news.
Those are the conversations that are ongoing right now.
I mean, one benefit, the department did use the ladder truck as sort of a safety breaker vehicle to ensure that the upstream part of Main Street was securely closed off during the Frost Fest on Saturday night. And and on the other end, we had our loader, again, to make sure that a car couldn't somehow break through into the crowd. We're trying to protect everybody.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments for Chief Emmanuel? Okay, thanks very much.
Hey, I appreciate your consideration. Would you like us to stick around? What can we do to best serve the council? Is there anything we can help you with this evening?
Any more you need?
I think so.
I haven't fired a fire hose before.
Say what?
I haven't been able to use a fire hose before.
Okay.
Yeah, all right.
I say wait till the sun's out. We're happy to accommodate you.
I think one
You want
thing,
to set Darrell on fire?
no, I think Council
Just wants to
Register
play.
brings up a good point, and actually, at the Frost Fest on Friday, several of the firefighters and I were talking about this, that we've had a chance for the council to visit the water plant, the wastewater plant, visited Jackson's Landing today, Wagon Hill Farm. We'd like to bring you to the fire department for a tour, to really see it, see the equipment, understand better how everything works there.
I'm just looking out for you guys.
So you've already been, right?
Never.
You could just hang out there now because you like it.
They didn't invite me over for coffee once.
We're happy to accommodate a visit whenever it's convenient for you, whether it's a group visit or piecemeal as your schedules permit. We're happy to, any of our administrative staff, our firefighters and officers, we're happy to accommodate you. You see, spend as much time as you'd like to with us.
It's good, I think, for the counselors to see what the space issues, for sure. I got a very good tour myself. Okay. Then,
That's it.
no more questions? Okay,
Thank you very much.
yeah, thank you. You're certainly welcome to stay, but
I was going to say, you already did that last meeting, right? For how long?
you've practiced that already.
Volunteer for a
I don't think
meeting.
there'll be any more fire department questions.
And I'm happy to work with Todd to answer anything else that comes up.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night, y'all.
And Rich Rain is with us online on Zoom.
Yes. So
No.
Oh, yeah, definitely go
we will move to
home.
questions for Durham Public Works Director. Any questions?
Why is there no snow?
I think it's working, I'm trying.
I did, could be something by the time we leave here.
Yeah, stand by.
It might be ice.
But could I just?
Yes,
So
please.
on that part, it's I'm glad you raised snow. So, we talk about staffing at Public Works, and it's a small department doing an awful lot. And sometimes when there are illnesses or vacancies or issues where staff can't be available, it makes it challenging because there's not a huge bench to fall back upon. So my understanding on Saturday night, for example, was that due to some staff not being able to be available, Sam Hewitt, our assistant director, was on to, or at least on call to drive the sidewalk plow.
I saw him doing it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The admin jumps in because we just have sort of, I would argue, minimal staffing to do all the things we do.
And on a similar note, I was talking to Tom Brannon, who oversees the transfer station, and he was there all day Saturday. He's great help to the swap shop and everyone who comes through. And he said he was on the shift starting at midnight. So
Exactly.
he spends his day at the transfer station and then could be driving all night.
Right.
Yes, so
It's
that's-
a great team. We
yeah.
have a great team of people who understand that when you're up against it and you have a storm that, lasts in duration of 30 hours, it's hard for, the core group only to deal with that. So we do pull, from wastewater and from solid waste, and they're willing to help us, kind of get that job done. So much appreciated. Can't say enough about the whole Public Works team.
Great.
Questions, comments?
Okay, yeah, I'll
Councilor Lund.
start. I have a question about, you have about bonding for the collection system repair and upgrade, which is shown in the capital improvement plan as money that we're expending every year. And I'm of the opinion that if it's a recurring expense like that, it's a bad idea to bond it, because it's exactly like using a credit card that you carry a balance on in order to pay for your groceries. You end up paying a lot more for your groceries than you would if you were paying cash. So Administrator Selig mentioned that there would be a hit to the ratepayers if you paid cash for this instead of bonding. Do you have an estimate, either you or Gail or Administrative Selig, what the impact would be to the ratepayers if we did pay cash for this?
I don't have it handy. That's not something I've thought of calculating in advance. So I'd have to look at Gail if that's something she can calculate either way.
Right. Because if it's at all feasible to pay cash for this, even at the expense of a small hit to the ratepayers, you're looking at 3-year bonds for this. So within 3 years, you won't have to worry about any of that anymore, because that money will no longer be on the debt service line.
Council, is that the $65,000?
That's the one that I'm specifically referring to. I mean, there's also one which is joint with UNH, and I get that that's trickier given that UNH's fiscal year is 180 degrees out of phase with ours, so at least in 2025 we may already be committed to bonding that. But in general, it would make generally, the only reason to do this would be if you think you could get a negative real interest rate, and that's not the way to bet.
I really
Can I just
hate
make a quick
jumping
comment?
in on this, but if the town has decent credit rating, and if you look at the interest rates they're paying, to the extent that inflation exceeds that, we're paying those bonds back with cheaper dollars. And
Right,
so
that's-
borrowing is not necessarily a bad strategy. 3 years, I'm tending to want to agree with you definitely. But if you're looking at 20-year bonding, I'm not convinced
Right.
at 4% or less that that's a bad idea as a general practice.
Okay, yeah. So the other one that I was looking at is for a 10-year bond, but the collection system is in the CIP as a 3-year bond.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Rich?
I guess the only two thoughts I would have on that is when we look at the asset, I think the life of the asset and the longevity of the investment is probably something to take into account. And when we look at the repairs that we're talking about, these are repairs that aren't 1, 2, or 3 year life expectancies. These are 10, 20, 25 year, maybe more life expectancies. And the other benefit that we have, and it's part of our agreement with UNH on the capital side, when we make these investments, and I guess it can go either way because it's really the mechanism of a pavement is different than how it's classified. But when it is a capital investment, if we continue to view this as capital, it's a 2/3, 1/3 share between the university and the town. So those are the only two comments I would make.
Right. Although this particular expense that I'm asking about is specifically for the town. We're paying 100% of that $65,000, whereas with the wastewater facilities plan, that one is allocated 1/3, 2/3.
Yeah, fair enough. And so I wasn't sure if you were looking at these, on a case by case or for all collection system upgrades,
I was specifically asking about the collection system repair upgrade town because that's all on us.
Yeah.
And you have that amount in the CIP for every year over the next 10 years, and it's which that seems to be that's more of an operational expense, even though I grant that it is with respect to capital. And I just feel more comfortable when you have something that's an annual expense like this, paying cash rather than paying interest on it, particularly if you're only bonding it for 3 years at a time.
So adding 65,000 to the wastewater budget would increase it 50 cents. So it would go from a proposed $10.66 per cubic feet to $11.16 per cubic feet.
And then the trade-off being that in 3 years, you'll no longer be paying interest on these bonds.
Right. Yep.
And there's a question of whether, in my mind, of whether interest rates are going to stay low. I'll admit that my crystal ball is as hazy as everybody else's, but if I had to guess, I'd say interest rates are more likely to go up than go down.
As long as inflation goes up with it.
Right. Now, it's not just inflation. There would be concerns with how the credit rating bureaus view both the U.S. debt and the state of New Hampshire debt, because we obviously can't have a higher credit rating than the state or the federal government. So currently, I believe we are rated AA, or at least last time I checked, we were rated AA. But we know there's a big budget issue brewing in the state, and there may be things brewing on the federal level too. And if either of those get knocked down below AA, our credit rating takes a hit too.
Yeah, so the question is whether you'd like to move that allocation to cash. It just impacts the ratepayers.
I think I will make the motion then that the collection system repair / upgrade town in the capital improvement plan for 2025 through 2034 be moved from bonding to operating budget.
Is there a second? I mean, that was a motion, right? I mean,
That is a
that's
motion, yes.
Done. Is there a second?
I apologize, I don't know that I understand the premise.
I don't understand the impact either. It's not
So
something I feel comfortable
I can go
with.
ahead and
Second
second
it,
it, and then we can discuss it. Sure.
Second.
Second by Counselor Register. All right. So,
Okay.
open for discussion.
Right. So the purpose of this is over the long term, since we'd be only bonding this for 3 years if we bond it. So within 3 years, we would no longer be paying debt service on this, which means the ratepayers won't be paying interest on this, and that we would, and since this money would not be in the debt service line of the budget, it would be available to pay cash for this project.
Would this not increase the deficit of our goal?
This is in the wastewater fund, so it would be in the short term, the wastewater, the people who pay sewer bills who would be paying for this.
Okay, so this would not
So this would
impact
not
operating budget
impact, this
whatsoever?
would not impact the tax rate.
What is the potential gain that you're trying to get out of this?
This is after 3 years of doing this, we would no longer be paying interest on the bonds because we will retire
How
any
long
bonds.
have
that-
we been doing this?
It's been ongoing, it's been the standard
So
practice.
that's what I would like to say, is if
So
we just,
technically, if it's
It just grows
40,000 paid off over 3 years, it's 13,300 a
Right.
year, but because it's every 3 years, we're already paying the 40,000, and we will pay 40 next year and 40 the year after.
Yeah.
And then if we go next year and take the 40, we're really going to 80 next year and 80 the year after. And then we would drop down to 40, which is kind of where we are now, and we would stay at 40. The only real difference would be 2 years of doubling up, plus then you finally get to the elimination of the interest expense, which is what, running about $2,000 a year? I'm looking at Gail.
Yeah, the interest expense as listed in the CIP is 4,525, and that's over the lifetime of one of these bonds, but because we are bonding over 3 years, that's the amount that we would be paying every year, assuming that interest rates remain at the level forecast in this budget.
So how much did you say it was?
4,500.
4,500.
4,525 in interest.
If you've got
on-
3
on-
bonds, you're paying 4,500 a year,
Right,
and it just keeps rolling forward.
right. On a principal of $65,000 per year.
I'm sorry, I thought we were talking 40,000.
No, it is 65,000.
It's
I don't know where you got the 40,000 number from.
I think it came up at some point, because I remember it too. To me, it's more about what the consistency of the policy is across the board. I mean, is this defined as being done this way, as other things are done this way? Then you don't want to start to shift one type of thing that we're doing this with, but others that we follow a different policy with, or, so to me, it's about consistency.
Yes, we'll let Todd slip in here.
So this change would not affect the town tax rate, but it would affect the sewer rate. And the sewer rate right now is proposed to reflect, as presented, a 3.4% increase, a rate of $10.66 per 100 cubic feet. So this would increase that number, 1066, by 50 cents. And
Right.
what I would do is if we got to a year in the future where the rate potentially might decline because we've retired a bond or something changes in the system, that would be the year where I would propose moving away from bonding, because the additional hit from the cash would fill the void of something else being retired, and that would try to keep the rate smooth. So it's a philosophical approach of mine is to try to keep a smooth rate, so there aren't ups and downs over time.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
that, but
Understood.
either's
So-
fine, either way's fine.
And the other issue, though, is this a capital purchase or is this maintenance? Because if it's capital, then it should be capitalized and should be a shared capital cost.
Right,
And
right.
if
but-
you're just gonna throw it into expenses, then that doesn't seem right.
Right, but there are other items in the capital budget which are capital expenses, but are on an annual basis that are funded on a cash basis. For instance, the road program is funded from the operating budget, but it's listed under the capital improvements.
Thought we were on wastewater.
I'm giving an example of another annual expense that is paid for in cash.
Which I was actually going to bring up later, so.
Okay.
Right, so,
Does it mean that
Yeah,
should be bonded?
Yes, go ahead.
So in essence, we put the 65,000 aside each year, and it does pay for capital improvements. It's to line repairs, manhole rehabilitations,
Right.
replacements, things like that. And when there's a sufficient amount available, Public Works will utilize that to tackle a finite project. You know, it could be
Yeah.
sewer problems on Woodman Road, and they'll deal with it. And then they do the next thing, the next project.
okay, well. I've said my piece, so I'm
That's good.
happy to
Any
have
more-
a vote on the motion.
That's
Well,
gonna
if
say-
I could, before we close discussion, just to clarify, would there be any downsides, tangible downsides, if we were to enact this policy, or if this change?
You have a temporary bump up?
It would be a short-term hit to the ratepayers who are connected to the sewer system.
An increase.
In the hopes of saving us $12,000 over 3 years, is that
No,
correct?
saving them.
Say,
It wouldn't
yes.
save the taxpayer anything.
Right, because it's
Right,
wastewater. water.
right. It would amount to a savings of 13,000 and change over a 3-year period, but after 3 years, there would be no further interest payments. So it would amount to $4,525 per year, assuming constant interest rates basically forever.
But not for the next 3 years.
We would still be paying interest on the bonds that have already been issued.
Right.
But that would be reduced by 1/3 each year until the last of those bonds is paid off.
Because basically, this is just stuff that goes into reserves anyway. Is that what you're saying?
I couldn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
Because basically what you're borrowing is going into a reserve account.
Yes. And my bet is probably we wouldn't bond it until we needed it, is that right?
Right, we don't bond until we've expended it.
Right.
Okay, that's,
Okay.
okay, so that's not the impression that I had from reading the capital improvement plan.
Yeah, we don't bond any projects until we've expended them, so the projection of the bond payments is if they were all done on time, but for instance, with the vehicles that the fire department just mentioned, it's maybe in the budget for '24 to be bonded, but if we don't receive the vehicle till '27, that's when the bond will take place.
Right, so in this case, if it takes us 3 years to accumulate enough money to do a project, then we bond the whole 3 years worth of this expense at that
At
time.
that time, yeah.
I guess that's an important point to make also. Gail, maybe you could just confirm this. If it's capital, it allows us, if we have a $130,000 project that we want to budget 2 years at $65,000, we can roll over that first year into the second and then execute a contract for that work. If it's operations and we don't have a PO commitment in year one, Gail, can you confirm that we no longer have that funding available if it's not capital?
Correct, yep.
So that will be.
Okay, yeah, this was not really explained, not really clear to me in the CIP.
We would still move, if you were to fund that project with the funds cash, we would still move the cash into the capital fund and it would be there yearly.
Right.
So it would still affect the budget. That would affect the budget directly that year.
And then we put the money into a reserve and save it over time.
It just,
Right.
yeah, it just sits in that
See,
account.
fundamentally, you're billing people for services you're not delivering.
Right.
And you're saving that money to use in the future. My concern about that
Right.
is we're charging students that money who will never ever see the benefit from it. We're charging many other people, transient people, who won't get the benefit. And so I have a problem with that from an equity standpoint.
Right. So with the clarification that this isn't really an annual expense, it's a reserve fund thing that,
It's like a placeholder.
It's like a donation you're forcing people to pay. It's much like the
right,
library.
yeah. And in that respect, it does differ from the road program, which those are expenses that take place every year.
That year.
Right.
Well, just to be clear, so there could be several projects, for example, lining projects like one we just did on Edgewood a couple years back, that could be $65,000 or less. And depending on what type of funding we have existing and what's been approved in the current fiscal year, we may move forward with all or part of that. So I wouldn't say that the current ratepayer does not benefit. In many cases, they would benefit because we're spending that existing money that was approved. In other cases, if we have a project that is much larger and we need several fiscal years, we would delay until we've accumulated enough funding. So it can go either way depending on what our requirements are for repairs. And
So it's also level loading. It's also then level loading. So that makes more sense.
Well, that's what bonding is level loading.
That's what I would say, that it would be better off the way we've had it.
Better off letting people keep their money and bond it when you need it.
But that's what we're doing.
No, it's not what we're doing.
Yeah, it is.
How?
Because it isn't bonded until
You expend it.
Until you expend it.
Right,
you
right.
spend it.
But we have it
Yeah,
level
but
loaded in the
you-
budget.
Right, to a need.
Oh, we're setting it aside, yeah.
The approval is set aside.
Right. But not the money.
We've level loaded approvals.
The authorization is set aside.
Exactly.
And,
I get that. Now I understand it. That makes sense.
all right, we've limited time tonight. I want to
Yes,
make sure
we
we
can keep moving.
rolling.
So
How do you
we
want
should
to
vote.
proceed?
We should
I
vote.
don't agree, but
We should vote. And we don't have any on Zoom, so, but we should still do a roll call vote for each of these. So, yes. What's that?
I thought that you said for each, and there's only one motion,
Yeah,
isn't there?
just- Yeah, there's just one motion now.
Right.
Yeah,
just one no-
there is a
one
motion on the
right.
floor, and
Do you want to restate it?
okay, so the motion was to shift the $65,000 annual expense under collection system repair upgrade town from bonding to operating budget for the wastewater fund.
Okay.
There you go.
Curtis, second. Oh.
I think we should vote.
Yeah,
Okay,
there has been
so
a second,
I will
so-
start. Sally Nadell, nay.
Joe Friedman, nay.
Eric Lund, aye.
Darrell Ford, nay.
Curtis Register, nay.
Heather Grant, nay.
James Bubar, nay,
Okay,
I think.
All right.
all right. Other questions about anything with Public Works?
Now, at some point, we need to talk about the elephant in the room, which is the Bickford Chesley House.
Yes, we can.
So there are no more
No more
Yeah.
questions
questions
about Public
for,
Works you want to talk about? No more
Well,
questions?
I thought that maybe Public Works would have something to say about that.
Oh,
yeah, if you,
Thank you.
anyone have a question for Rich on the Bickford Chesley House?
So,
And I'm happy to stick around during the council's discussion on that, so if a question comes up during that discussion, I'll be here.
Okay, yes.
I had one question about that. Rich, I assume that your budget this year doesn't include any operating expenses for a renovated Chesley House? But it would next year?
That's
If it goes forward, your operating expenses would come after the renovation?
That's correct. We do have some operating expenses for the status quo at the Bickford Chesley House, but nothing to reflect any type of improvements that were made.
right, which Carolyn Singer provided the council with operating budget for the Bickford Chesley House, assuming that we go forward with option number 2, which is that beginning in 2026, there would be revenue from renting the caretaker apartment, and as well as gallery and new barn, which those are placeholder amounts. And yeah, and what that would mean is that we would be going from the current roughly $10,000 per year expense under the status quo to roughly $10,000 profit per year. This is based on the assumption that the apartment is rented at the HUD 2024 HUD fair market rent, which is roughly $2,000 a month.
And what makes the person a caretaker?
There's a whole list of
Right,
things
and
that
they're
they-
not getting paid for that, though.
No, we would rent the house to an individual who would pay a monthly rent, potentially, a subsidized rent, not necessarily market value, but workforce housing rate. And in exchange, they would need to agree to take on some activities at the property to help open the gate in the morning, close it in the evening, keep an eye on the place, walk the property periodically to address people perhaps who don't have their dogs on leash when we're beyond 10 a.m., and other responsibilities that will really vary based upon the skills of the person who is interested in the house.
I was told, somewhere I've heard, that a few years ago, there was some discussion over charging a fee to use Wagon Hill or to charge for parking, and that it ended up that apparently because of the federal loan provisions, we actually weren't able to charge for people using it, that it needed to be essentially open to the public. Is that? Yeah, I mean, I'm getting it like third or fourth hand, so.
Yeah, and I haven't thought about this for like a decade, so.
Okay.
But 20 plus years ago, the town did accept federal money, and we have since then as well for certain projects of the property, shoreline restoration, et cetera. And one of the requirements is that the property needs to be open to the public. So one thing we cannot do is to say Wagon Hill Farm is only available for Durham residents. No one else can come. In terms of charging out-of-town people a fee to use the property, if the fee were a reasonable fee, then I believe potentially we could charge that fee. In the past, though, the rationale has been that that's not something Durham wanted to do. And for example, many other communities have recreational areas and the vast majority don't charge the public to use. Durham people use those amenities, people from elsewhere use Durham's.
Well, I was just thinking about all the laundry list of potential uses that could be done in the house, and whether or not it was legitimately available to get revenue for those or not.
Right, so we've talked as well about charging just for parking at the property. And up until now, we've had a logistical issue of sort of how do we collect the money? We don't have the staff to go monitor the cars regularly. But it's something we're going to talk about again with the new sort of pay and display, pay by plate technology. Maybe we could have something like that and make it work. In terms of, I think the second part of your question, we have limited parking up there that meets the needs of the property for 90 to 95% of the time. When it doesn't.
I was really driving towards the building and the use of the building. And I've heard wedding venues and all sorts of different ideas. And so I'm specifically saying, can you charge revenue for utilizing, for a private group to utilize the space or not? And that's where I was getting confused that maybe we wouldn't be able to do that.
No, we would be able to charge individuals for use of the space. There are some caveats though. One is parking availability. We need to make sure what we were renting the space for, that there was enough capacity to handle the parking. And another is we don't currently allow alcohol at the property. And alcohol.
Or smoking.
I don't remember smoking one way or the other. I'm sorry.
The example lease that was provided did specifically ban smoking both in the house and on the premises.
Right, so I'm just thinking about all of Wagon Hill Farm. I just haven't thought about smoking for a long time. I'm sorry there. The other challenge with alcohol, or thing we'd have to work through with alcohol is, to date, we've let Audrey Klein and Brendan O'Sullivan, the code people, know that alcohol was not in the cards because typically alcohol service would require additional fire suppression requirements. So there'd be, I believe, occupancy limitation in terms of what we're envisioning right now. And we're really talking about kind of minimal fire suppression systems at the site. So we'd have to look at that and evaluate it. It's not to say it couldn't be done in the future, but option 2 at this point, which is what's included in the budget, includes making the barn 3-season and essentially readying it for potential community conversation around how we want to use it. And right now, there are periodically painting classes that are held, and the instructor reaches out to say, there's going to be rain tomorrow, can we come in the barn so we can still have our class? And right now we have to say no. Or if there's a camp there or a kayak program and it's going to be stormy, the barn would be a great base camp to come in for shelter. Right now we can't even allow them to be in that structure. So this would provide handicap accessibility, basic fire protection, the bathrooms, and we could use it in a rudimentary way. But I didn't envision that being a major money maker for us, but that's not to say we couldn't do some interesting things there.
Are we fully moved over to this conversation, or are we still involved with Public Works?
I don't know.
Yeah.
This is part of
Yes.
Public Works. I had a question about Public Works. How does the caretaker position would provide security and some other benefits to the home, but you manage a number of buildings where there's nobody in those buildings overnight. You have security for those buildings. You respond to those buildings if there's a fire or there's an intruder or there's issues. I don't know if you've had a chance to even think about what it would cost for your department to manage that facility without having somebody live there.
So I think if we had the necessary protections in place, which we would upgrade what we currently have. So we have burglar and fire protection from a standpoint of notification, not suppression. We deal with that right now as a vacant, facility. Previously, there was a person living in that facility for many years. He was a police officer, and he provided, value added by opening the gate, closing the gate, having a presence on the site. I haven't looked to determine, what additional measures we would have to take if it was a renovated building without a caretaker, but with, valuable assets in there. And we'd have to look at that to determine, is the burglar protection and fire protection that we would have in place, would that be adequate? Or would there, I'm sure the police on their rounds would include this within, some of their standard rounds. But that's not something that we've gone too deep into.
I think to reinforce your point, Joe, there's going to be periods of vacancy as we look for tenants. So assuming that everything goes the way we want it to go and we upgrade it for occupancy of a caregiver, there are still going to be periods of time where we're going to have a plan for someone else to secure, open, and patrol that area. And so regardless of whether a caretaker is put into this position or not, if we're upgrading this building for occupancy in general, there is going to need to be a town plan to have as at a minimum as a fallback to open and close and secure that property.
And it would seem to me that the so-called caretaker would say, whatever it would cost Department of Public Works to maintain that building, I want that discount on my rent. Therefore, you may get zero rent at the end of the day. So there may not be any income coming in from the caretaker. And especially the caretaker is going to take a vacation, like you said, so Department of Public Works will have to be there and the police will have to be there if that person isn't there 24/7. And they're not going to be. Who would be?
Yes. Again, we did for 20 or so years have a tenant, and that relationship worked very well. It wasn't only one tenant, there were several over that time period. And each were willing to pay a somewhat reduced market rate for the property in exchange for some services, and it worked very well. Now, sometimes the tenant is out of town on vacation, that's fine. There may be periods where we haven't filled it, but at least from, I think, my perspective and that of the Durham, the team that's been working on this, we'd prefer to have somebody present at the site more often than not, just keeping an eye on things. And we do have issues now where, young people will go up there, they'll park where it's hard to see, and the police may not know they're there, and who knows what they're doing. And that was much less of an issue when the gate was closed in the evening and there was a police car parked in front. I mean, that really discouraged a lot of activity. So from my perspective, option 2 simply restores a program we had for many years that worked very well. And that's why I didn't look to do a business plan for it. I knew that, and what Carolyn Singer and Janet Mackey have provided in the packet you have, it does cash flow out to the positive. It's a positive for us, and it does provide that enhanced security. Can we manage? I mean, could we potentially do the project at least initially without the caretaker's apartment? It's feasible to do. I would argue option 2 makes a whole lot of sense for all the reasons stated, but I understand there are other perspectives and there are limited funds.
Is there a reason this wasn't bonded, or there is not a bonding option?
Oh, there's absolutely a bonding option. A year ago, in terms of the town's unreserved or undesignated fund balance, there are many purposes for that, and years ago, 24 years ago, our fund balance was in very poor shape. We did not have a sufficient reserve, and we worked hard over time to build that. And we've created a policy, and last year, I noticed, a year ago during the budget season, we were starting to peak up at the top end of that of the threshold of our policy. And I thought perhaps a year from then, which is now, we could spend down some of that undesignated fund balance on the Madbury Road project in particular, because that's, I think, an incredibly value-added project for a host of reasons. And we don't want the fund balance to be too large, because then I would, in this case, completely agree with Councilor Bubar, who's going to argue this later, that we shouldn't be holding the public's money for no reason, you know? Then it becomes sort of a additional float beyond what's necessary, and the public doesn't have the benefit to it. So a year ago, I thought we could spend down approximately $1 million on Madbury Road. As we went through this audit process this past year, it became clear that we did very well last year. We added over $1 million of additional fund balance, and undesignated fund balance. And so my thought, given that, was that we could use that additional fund balance to pay for Wagon Hill Farm with cash. And I look at Wagon Hill Farm as one of our many assets. It was a significantly depreciated asset that was in very poor condition. It demands attention. It's an historic resource, a community resource, and I believe it could be much, much more. We've worked hard as our working group to pursue external funding, and we've been very successful in doing that, bringing in, you know, over $300,000 with the, well, looking
306.
Thank you, $306,000 in LCHIP money. So I think we've really been successful trying to pursue funds, and this is a way to essentially restore what we had before it was fully depreciated, and to activate the barn area, which I think would be a tremendous benefit to the community, and we could do it at no impact to the taxpayer. So I thought that was a good investment, but we could spend the money in another way.
So you're saying
We
the
could bond
current
it as
budget
well.
plan, the current capital improvement program
Does not.
amount does not impact the budget whatsoever?
It does not. It's paying with cash.
So that's what I was,
We already had.
because when I first questioned this about the remaining budget items, and I sent you, you had sent an email saying this money had been put in the wrong place, so, because it was coming out of a different fund and it shouldn't be here. Isn't that, Wagon Hill was part of this remaining budget items, and then it was in the wrong bucket, and it needed to shift? Is that the same item as what's coming out of here? Because that's what I was getting confused at, because you're right, you're saying,
No, it
you're
was
shifting this to fund balance.
It's in the right place. I was just saying it's a 1 in a million time that this will happen. So it's making a big impact this year.
But it's just,
But
it's
it's
showing here,
just-
but it's money we already have.
Right.
Right. In and out.
So it's in and out. And so is, because we also then have $1 million in the Madbury roadway again for next year.
Right.
Which could be bonded if you ended up thinking that the reserve money that we have needed to be maintained, we could bond that instead of using that $1 million. So I'm seeing these two big numbers.
Yes.
They're both coming out, you know, with no bond. One could be, which could be the $1 million for Madbury, and we've got the we basically got the cash to fund.
It sounds to me that we already have the cash to meet the town goal as well.
Yeah.
To meet the town goal.
That's the issue, that, you know, you're saying you already have the cash, so it doesn't cost the taxpayer anything. And I would say you also have the cash to give back to the taxpayer, because
Yes.
it's their money in the first place.
So,
And so it does cost you something.
The
It
question
costs you
is-
exactly what it costs you. It's just a matter of when you want to record that over time.
So I feel like this is an artificial constraint then, because it sounds to me that we have the funds to make this budget, this capital improvement program, and our town council goal work, but the way we're shifting it around is what is causing this little bit of uncertainty.
I don't think it was clear. I don't think this was presented clearly in the beginning, is what I'm saying.
so
Because I was confused.
So that's a win-win-win in my mind. If
Well, we're $463,000 away from meeting the council goal in terms of the tax rate.
Yep.
Now, it would be possible, instead of putting $1 million toward Madbury Road, for example, to only put $500,000 toward Madbury Road, or looking at Wagon Hill Farm,
Bonded.
instead of doing $1.3 million or what the number is, to do $800,000 toward Wagon Hill Farm. But the challenge is that I hesitate to use, and I don't recommend using, undesignated fund balance to artificially lower the tax rate. Because what that does is it means we're collecting less tax dollars than we actually need to meet the ongoing cost of running the town. And the following year, you have to again apply undesignated fund balance to keep that rate artificially low. But the following year, what will happen is the town budget will increase yet again. So that is in essence a spiral where year after year you eat away at the fund balance, and eventually you'll use all the fund balance, will be unable to maintain it, and the rate will spike.
That feels like a flow problem, though. If we're worried about not being able to sustain this tax rate or sustain a viable tax rate, but we're willing to front 2.5 million now, I feel like we're causing ourselves problems.
Fundamentally, you
That's
gotta change the slope of the curve. We're spending more than we can sustain.
So
And
I-
the
how do we
spending
end
has
up
got
with-
to-
And I get the revenue
So,
is the issue.
yeah, so I recommend using the undesignated fund balance for one-time capital expenditures where it's a one and done, and there's not a continuing obligation to rely on that fund balance. The one instance where I, in the past, recommended we use fund balance was when we entered the Great Recession. We used some fund balance to artificially lower the rate, and over a period of like 3 or 4 years, we slowly dug ourselves out of that mess. But it's challenging to do, and we had a strong compulsion to do it because the economy was crashing and people were struggling. So we were trying to find a way to deal with that. Another thing we did was we bonded a significant part of the road program instead of paying cash. And then over time, so we enjoyed a 1-year savings because we didn't spend cash on the road program. Everyone was excited, but then as we moved toward a cash basis again, all of a sudden we had additional cash we had to allocate each year to not hit the tax rate.
Well, we have
So-
2 major projects that are long-term, and potentially 3 if we count West Edge, that are potentially revenue-generating projects. So the infrastructure that's being presented on Madbury Road will increase trafficability of that road, which may increase frequency of use to the vendors in town, may increase the number of people that show up in the town.
Yes.
The Bickford Chesley House is an investment into the community as well, with a potential rate of return based off of who we pull into the area, to whether it's just caretaker stuff or whether it's special events stuff. And then you add in the West Edge, and there's another revenue generating potential there. I think if we were to do a phased approach, we could respect and protect the taxpayers' money that we currently have, because they're struggling too, not just, like everybody's struggling right now, it's just how it is. We made a goal to meet a certain tax rate, which I think we should do within, if we have it within our capability, I think it would be kind of a neglect to not do it. And we can still make ends meet. It's just how do we chunk that payment out? How do we, if we phased approach the Bickford Chesley House, we could still give them what they want in regards to not wasting LCHIP funds, having a viable security measure that protects the site and expands its capabilities to be more than just a monument, and we could still meet the needs of the community in regards to making that goal. I know it's uncomfortable, but it is possible.
Yes, it is possible. It's
Without spiraling is what I'm saying.
Nope, I don't believe that's the case, because if we spend, for example, $500,000 in undesignated fund balance to, again, artificially bring down the tax rate, then we have to, and if we don't want it to jump back, then a year from now, we need to spend another $500,000 from fund balance to keep the rate there.
Well, the goal would change.
Well,
Well,
I just
The
have
goal's
one
artificial.
comment on,
The goal is artificial, but this problem is also artificial. I mean, we're making this problem because of the goal. We're making this problem because of how we're moving the money around. I think the goal makes sense considering the amount of inflation that's going on right now and the amount of costs our taxpayers or the consumers are having to afford. People are hurting. You talk to folks on the street. I mean, there's plenty of people that are saying that the difference between teacher benefits and paying their taxes is the difference between them putting bread on the table. And so I know it's inconvenient, but if we have the ability to make this goal happen, we can adjust fire next year if the situation changes or if the inflation rate is too untenable and we're spiraling out of control based off of this artificial dump of money into reducing that tax rate. But it feels like we are not giving it our all if we can make this work and taking care of our taxpayer while also meeting the requirements and the goals of the previous council of making sure the Bickford Chesley House is taken care of. And then I look at that as a separate benefit of potential revenue gaining stuff in 5 to 10 years.
So may I have, yes.
Okay, we've really gotten into a big discussion here, so I would like to make a motion, and then we can work from that motion. So I move that we approve option 2 for the Bickford Chesley House restoration as listed in our budget for 2025.
Second.
So now, discussion.
Okay, so I just wanted to get onto this.
Hey, 8:36 hours. And
So,
Friedrich's in
yeah,
here.
just for the minutes, M. Friedrichs has joined the meeting.
Oh,
at,
okay.
You're right. I'm sorry. I'm
8:36 PM.
Okay,
And she is approved.
and she is
They are
approved.
approved, yes.
Okay,
So-
so, yes, discussion.
So back to the dollars and just kind of tagging onto that is, so to explain your reserve fund that we have right now, that is a full cash outlay of $2.7 million for 2025, $1 million back into the Madbury Road project and whatever to the 1.17
Yeah.
to the Chesley House. We were struggling with money. We brought our reserves down at the COVID timeframe, and we've slowly built it up. So you've been able to put enough in reserves out of tax income to the point where it got high enough where we wanted to expend it instead of bond, like the Madbury Road improvement, which is an amazing thing for the town because that's a really, really crappy entrance to our town. But that means that we've had enough money every year, and we increased taxes last year because I know mine went up, and the year before, whichever years those were, we're paying more. So we were able to then buffer that in. And now you're saying that we shouldn't take $500,000 out to balance our budget, even though you've had enough money for the last 3 years to bring back your fund, so that we can now expend $2 million. So the logic isn't there in my mind. We can either bond Madbury and take $500,000 out to equalize, but no matter what, I don't see how we could creep this into being a problem of a shortage in the next 4 years, as things like Tech Drive should be having a bigger increase in property taxes as they get their new very value-added customers into that building, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if we've been able to build that fund up for the last 3 years, how is it that taking $500,000 now, when we can put $2 million now out of that fund, how can that affect us in the next 5, 6, 7 years? It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I guess the question is, how does money get into the undesignated fund balance? And it comes in 2 ways. One is we bring in more revenue than we had anticipated. So that would create a surplus which washes into that fund. The other is that for whatever reason, we underexpend the appropriation for a given year. And any excess from that appropriation goes into the fund as well. And until last year, basically, it wasn't an issue because we were still operating within that undesignated fund balance policy we created. Now, our auditors, in fact, have indicated that the State Department of Revenue's recommendations are for a fund balance that far exceeds our policy. But we felt, for a variety of reasons, our policy was adequate. So right now, we have about $1.3, $1.5 million in excess of what our policy states. And we could use all of that $1.5 million to reduce the tax rate. But unless we're prepared to continue allocating an additional $1.5 million the following year to, I would argue, artificially keep the rate low, then our fund balance will slowly drop from a surplus of $1.5 million to now being under the threshold, the top end of the threshold by 1.5 million, and so on. Now, how would we get out of that hole? If we brought on additional valuation to help stabilize the tax rate, that would be terrific. But at this point, other than the edge, which is a big question mark, we have very little in the
25-year,
pipeline.
25-year, whatever,
Very
who knows
little
how long.
pipeline.
But then how
So
are we
it-
able to take out 1.173 million now?
Because over time, we've been able to accrue reserve. And this past year, per our audit, we, I think, washed in an additional like $1.3 million into the reserve, because we were very successful bringing in revenue last year, and we underexpended our bottom line for a whole host of reasons.
So if we take this 1.173 out, what do we have left?
Do you want to look at that?
It's around 5 million, I believe. And the reason why we can do that this year is because we're doing it for a one-time project.
Yes, I
So
get
that's
that,
why,
yeah, I get that.
So if I can attack your argument a little bit there, Todd, and as long as I'm not talking too many times, so you can tell me to be quiet. But it seems like a fairly slippery slope that is mained on assumptions that we're going to keep the tax rate where it's at right now for the indefinite future. And that's not necessarily the case. I think as the situation changes, there's obviously more conversations that can be had to fill that gap if we create such a massive shortfall in our revenues because of artificially reducing the tax rate by pulling money from the undisposed fund. But we're making a ton of money in regards to interest. The auditor talked about what, 500,000 in interest we made last year, which is already the gap that we have for our rate. And I think it is misrepresenting the problem to say that we're only going to spiral out of control maintaining artificially reduced tax rate, because that's not necessarily the situation that will occur. I get that it will artificially reduce the tax rate for this fiscal or for this year, but that we will adjust based off of the revenue site picture and the realities on the ground with inflation for the following town council goals.
Just,
My concern with what Curtis is suggesting is that we're really just kicking the can down the road. That you're gonna run out of that $9 million if you don't fundamentally change the underlying budget. We need to cut $460,000 at a minimum of this. It leaves the town property taxes with an increase of over 4%. And all of our older friends on Social Security are only gonna get 2.5% next year. And a lot of them are really already scraping by. And so I'm actually not really comfortable with the 1.4% increase. I'm thinking we should have held it flat for this year. And fundamentally, if you don't start doing that, you're just gonna keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger problems.
So I think that if we think about that, then instead of even sort of this whole getting the Chesley, we want to talk about Chesley, but what we aren't doing is starting at page, whatever here, 44 is the first place I start. And still going line by line, because we didn't have a lot of questions for DPW. We didn't have a lot of questions for fire.
mean,
I
don't know
haven't
that we
seen
should go
where we're going to,
backwards.
huh?
I said, I don't know that we should go backwards in this process.
But I mean, we haven't really, like,
This-
what, did you guys vote on anything last time in terms of changes in the budget? So, I mean, there's 10,000 here, there's 10,000 there. How you add that up to 400, I don't know, but
I think that a lot of the questions have been sent out by counselors.
Yes.
That addressed a lot of those items. If we literally
We
don't,
haven't
if you
talked
don't
about 'em,
see
though.
an item that you would like to see amended, then there's no reason to go line by line.
well, we just hopped right into the Chesley thing, so I didn't think we started getting to that point when we
So-
started on it, so.
But
It's the
we
biggest
do-
one, so.
We do have a motion. It's been seconded. We've had discussion. Is there any more discussion specific to the Bickford Chesley house, not the overall, that house?
In relation to the same discussion, though, it was suggested that increased revenue sources may be at hand in the future. The tech drive was mentioned. Is the tech drive Gail, do you know if the tech drive revenue is forecast to come in 2025 from the tenant
No, I would have
improvements?
said
What-
2026.
No, we
what
didn't
tech
include
drive
any.
revenue?
Which would be the increased value out there because of the
Harris
tenant
Technology
improvements.
Drive,
So,
the
Right.
building.
Raytheon or
yeah, so.
Because we couldn't do it this year because the improvements aren't made yet. So it'd be more like a 2026, I think.
Right, right. My understanding is that in order to count in a given calendar
Right.
year, it has to,
Yeah.
it has to be in place by April 1st of
Yeah,
that year.
I understood that. That's why I was thinking of that for 2026.
But April of 2025, in other words.
Right,
If
right,
it's
right,
in
yeah.
place by, are you forecasting any revenue from that project, any increased revenue?
No,
No, we're not.
Yeah,
And
Yeah,
and if you
yeah.
heard, is
So-
that scheduled?
Darcy's simply provided a blanket estimate because building permits generally have really trailed off. So she was thinking based upon whatever occurs at Technology Drive, plus the general building permits, it was equal to about a 1% increase in the overall valuation. At Technology Drive, it's not, new building, it's a facelift in essence, some changes inside as well. But she doesn't have a clear sense of that. She hasn't been out there, and she won't until April 1st, so.
It'll be significant. I mean, the things that they were doing are more than a facelift. If you look at what the types of suppliers or companies that are going into there, I think it's added a lot, it's going to add a lot of value to that building. I mean, more so than the building that's falling down, that's for sure, because there's actually going to be people in it, which I But
The others.
I don't know what they paid for it either.
The Mill
so.
Plaza, where they'll reskin the front of Building B, the rear building, but again, that wasn't viewed to be tremendous additional value.
Or it would be the tenant improvements, not the exterior facade that adds
Right.
value.
Right.
I did have a question related to the motion under discussion, which is, my understanding is that option 1 for the Bickford Chesley House would still involve accepting the LCHIP grants. I just wanted to get clarification on that option 1 would also enable accepting the LCHIP grants.
Yes, short answer is yes. It's not ideal, we'll have to communicate with LCHIP, let them know our plans, make sure we get something in writing in advance that they'd be okay with it, and we'd be committing to working toward option 2 over time.
So I have suggested this
I like
motion
the way-
just so that we can resolve this. I think Councilor Register at one point made a good point, that we don't have to find consensus before we vote. So if we're looking for consensus before we vote, we will be meeting on the 16th and the 23rd and maybe the 17th, 18th, 19th. So just, and it's not a threat, but just the reality is we can spend as much time as you feel you need to, but I just fear that if we're trying to make decisions, the best way to do that is to jump into it.
I just wanted to say, just to directly answer Council Register, can we take undesignated fund balance and use it to arrive at the council goal on the tax rate with one fell swoop? Yes. The reason I didn't recommend that was what I've explained.
Yes.
But if you want to do that, you can. My only caution is what I've explained, that we slowly become reliant on artificially using that undesignated fund balance, and unless we can wean ourselves off of it in some way, it could be new unanticipated revenue that comes in. It could be some windfall in operations, and we find a way to be more efficient and cut costs. It could be new valuation that comes online unexpectedly. There are a lot of ways to get out of it, but I didn't recommend it for the reasons I said. I always prefer to use those kind of dollars on one-time capital projects where it's done and we move forward. And they're integral projects to our operations anyway, but it keeps the rate stable and dependent on annual revenue expenditures. And in terms of Councilor Bubar's question, the underlying challenge with our spending curve, yes, we are on a spending curve that is going to exceed the rate of inflation.
And the 9 million in the budget, in the funds.
Well, if we,
Over time,
if
if
we
you use it.
it, right. But that's a broader question about the services we're offering, if we want to keep offering them or change the services, that's a fair
That's a
conversation.
discussion that should be had. Do we really need to continuing offering all the services? But to the Chesley Whitford
Yes.
motion on the table.
Yes, yes.
I wish my friend Councilor Burton was here because I liked his suggestion. Why can't we take it to a town warrant? Give them option 3 and let the people decide. A number of people have testified how wonderful an idea this is. I'm sure that they could get the support from the public. And then the funding is bonded, use the reserved funds. That doesn't matter. Let the people decide, what do you really want to do here? Option 1, option 2, option 3.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, I disagree with that.
Okay.
That's why they hired us.
that's what we're
Make
looking
those
at.
decisions.
That's why we
If
get
they
the-
wanted to make those decisions, I mean, we could have, have
Well, I
them
don't
make every
think they
decision.
want me making that decision. That's why I was trying to be,
No, I want you to make that decision.
well,
Yeah.
I'm willing to.
I was hoping I could call the question and also say thank you very much for that explanation.
All right, so I will happily start again. Sonia Dow, aye.
Joe Friedman, nay.
Eric Lund, aye.
Darrell Ford, aye.
Curtis Register, nay.
Heather Grant, aye.
James Bubar, nay.
Where do we end up?
Did M go yet?
No.
Not yet.
No, M.
M. Friedrichs, nay.
So that's 1, 2, 3. I have 4 yeses and 4 nos,
It's a tie.
so it fails.
Right. The catch is that the option 2 is what is in the budget that Administrator Selig presented.
Right, so,
So in actuality, the motion should be to reduce what's being proposed to something else, or to increase it to something else. Because,
I'm willing to make a motion here. Make a motion to fund the Bickford Chesley House per the original agreement that the town council committed to of $400,000. Is there a second?
that's,
I don't know what that is.
that's going back to the original estimates.
That's what we're being held, that's what our feet are being held to the fire on.
Oh, here's Wayne.
Who's here?
Hey, wait a minute.
5 minutes too late.
That is my motion.
A
Is there a
minute too
second?
late.
Was that a 400 even, Curtis?
Whatever the original town council agreement was, but I read it as 400,000.
I'll second that for discussion purposes.
Yeah.
so that is the 400,000 plus the L-chip grant.
That's
and
correct.
Okay, and Moose Plate grant.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
So do we have a total of what that would be?
706,000.
Yes.
Yeah, so I would recommend against that motion because I believe it creates a property that's unusable. You know, we'd stabilize the building, but if we're making that kind of investment, I think we should ready the building so the public can use it and occupy it. And so I just think that's, we would be better served to move ahead with option 1 if there's not an interest in option 2 at this point. That would
Right,
create
and
a
the other thing
very
is
usable
that
space.
the other thing is that that $400,000 number was based on construction costs being underestimated
yeah.
compared to the more recent estimate we have.
Right.
Option 1 is, as I understand it, the minimum that we would need to spend in order to preserve the building without giving us any ability really to occupy it.
And I believe the 400 we already have
not true.
allocated, correct, Gail? The original 400,000 from a past year.
We
I'd have to-
do,
yeah.
we
Yeah.
do, that's in our existing capital plan. And just to clarify what Councilor Lund just said, the option 1 does give us basic occupancy. It does minimal work, rough-in work for the second floor caretakers, quarters, and the barn has has no work done on that. So option one is basic occupancy for the farmhouse.
Is the $400,000 that you already have in the budget included in option one or on top of option one?
On top of option one.
It's on top of option one. So we need the option one funds that are being requested.
Plus the
in
400.
capital budget,
Right.
along with the
Plus
existing
the
funds.
LCHIP,
Right.
plus,
Moose plate. Moose plate?
I don't know.
Moose plate.
And
20,000.
again, and if there's a goal to go to option two at some future point, there's an additional mobilization cost. So by breaking it into parts, we're increasing the cost over time. So, but we
Assuming
can
the
do
rate
it.
of inflation and that construction materials or the change of construction materials don't occur.
Could be a decline. Don't know.
Right.
But that would be based on,
The
I mean,
construction materials may change. We use different material. I mean, I get the brick and mortar is the standard, but we also have made new use of plastics, new use of lighter steels, new use of carbon fiber. Like, I get this stuff is,
this has to be historically done.
I believe that.
Right.
But
So-
is all this project going to be done in 2025 anyway? I mean, you're not going to complete this project in
I think
2025.
Councilor Register's initial point is exceptionally valid. We're being pillared by not wanting to do what prior councils had done, but prior councils voted for $400,000, some number like that.
The
Well,
council,
That's not really accurate. They
Well,
voted
then
to
what-
have it, they voted to bring it up to a certain level, and that certain level is a lot more expensive now.
That's right now, but they never went through with it then. And they may have said, bring it up to a certain level, but they said that without having any clue what that was gonna cost?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
well, and the council did
Well, I'm not,
right, approve the vision as outlined in the LCHIP grant application as well,
Right.
which included these various elements.
so there were estimates at that time as to what the total cost would be.
Right. And those estimates proved to be optimistic,
The original.
They were
the
insufficient.
original
And-
estimates.
A restoration is different than just fixing up the place. So it's restoration is looking at replacing materials with materials.
I would say that's even more reason to hold it to the original cost because they were cashing checks. They had no understanding of what they were buying.
The apartment doesn't have to be historical, right? It's the bottom floor.
The building as a whole
It's-
is done.
it's the whole
historically.
building.
The whole building.
Whole building.
The kitchenette's going to be historically accurate?
Yes, yes. As long as it has, there's been certain parts of the farmhouse.
Yeah, it
and-
was modified, yeah.
Yeah, and those are kind of excluded from historic
Right,
preservation.
right.
You know, the building itself will need to maintain if it's original.
And just for argument's sake here, assuming that we do get the $10,000 a year benefit, for the cost of option two, solely on $10,000, that's 117 years before we get an equalized rate of return.
Well, compared to option one, that would be closer to 30 years.
Well, the intention here is that we readdress this with a little more fidelity and a little more deliberate mindset. I feel like over the last 4 to 5 weeks, I've gotten really familiar with the Bickford Chesley house, and then after we approve this budget, we're going to get unfamiliar with it again. And I feel like there is an obligation to phase this out. This is a large chunk of cash that we have in undesignated funds. I understand that. But we're arguing that we have the money to pay for this, but not enough money to reduce the tax rate. And there is a viable opportunity here, but it is going to take some thought, energy, some real assessment, collaborating with not only the Historical Society and the Historical District Commission, but with us respected to the taxpayers and a business plan so we know what we're trying to get. Because hoping that people are going to occupy the space and hoping that we get enough vendors to maintain its relevance isn't a good enough rate of return in my opinion. There is a lot of risk there and a lot of room for gap years of investment.
I just want to kind of second what Councilor Register was saying in that I would love to vote for option 2 for the Bickford Chesley House, or even option 3, but my concern in doing so is that we are adding to town services, and that will incur an increased maintenance cost next year and every year further down the road. And right now, we are on a curve that Councilor Bubar identified, which is that we are outspending our budget. And I think the budget is already pretty generous because it does account for inflation, and it does also, account for increases in the assessment. So what that means overall is that the amount of money that the town is spending each year is increasing by more than just inflation, because it's also including the increased assessed value. And meanwhile, a lot of people's paychecks are not increasing by, 1% value plus 4% inflation. And so until we can get a curve on our town services and on our maintenance budget, then I really feel like we can't be adding to services and maintenance. I would love to vote differently and to see a town budget that stays within, a flat budget, or within very modest increases, so that we feel like we've stabilized everything. But I feel that without having that, I feel very uncomfortable further expanding the town's expenditures by adding new projects.
I'm a little concerned that we're forgetting that we pay salaries to a lot of people in this town who work for this town, and we're not taking into account that we have contracts with them which increase annually.
Right. And not
So
only.
this is not a one-time increase. I mean, I think that some people sitting around this table need to be really creative right now about what it is you're willing to give up in this town so that we have a budget on December 31st.
And that's why I
So we
think
need to
you're-
come to the table with a motion that says, I think we should cut, boom, and save, boom, dollars. To talk in generalizations is not getting us to the end point. Just
I think
saying.
that's why I think it is, this is an unusual bump, because we have had to negotiate salaries based on an extremely unusual inflation rate since the coming out of the whole COVID situation. Now, obviously, those salaries have to be maintained, because they needed to have that right sizing done. We've also increased our property taxes in this year. So in theory, those should level out as we go forward. But yeah, if we're going to be cutting into this, what are we taking out of the rec department? What are we taking? Because
This is what the council has to decide.
if we're
That's our
talking
job.
about just Chesley House right now, that's not really where the meat is, because this is money that had absolutely nothing to do with the budget to start with, yet we're going to spend another hour talking about the Chesley House. So that's why I think, open the book and start coming up with some numbers.
For the last 2 sessions, then, I guess I would ask, because I feel like we've already had multiple opportunities to ask questions about the operating budget from the people who wrote the operating budget. And it feels like if we're trying to go backwards, we wasted a lot of people's time.
I just think I've seen some of the numbers coming through, and Em sent an email that talked about, 10,000 in surveying in one area, and, if you start to go through some of these, the numbers aren't very big to come up with 400, right?
Right.
But I think that the challenge is we've answered each of these questions and explained the implications of the various changes. So the council needs to be comfortable making those reductions, and essentially a loss in service in some way or another. So the alternative is, as Councilor Bubar mentioned, and some councils have done this, the council simply says, Todd, this is the number, cut this amount, we don't care how you do it, and that's the amount we're going to fund. And then you kind of allocate that decision to me, and I come back with what I think makes sense and decide if you like that or not. The challenge I have is that I'm providing with what I think makes sense, unless you provide some guidance. And in terms of the budgetary goal, I just want to note, we have We have 7 bullet items, and amongst those 7 bullet items for our goals, we have 24 different subheadings, and one of those subheadings has to do with the budget goal. Nowhere does it say the budget goal reigns supreme over everything else. Rather, it says in that council goal document, there is no prioritization here, it's all important. So I think that I'd put back on you, so how do you value some of this? I've done my best to try to figure out how I value it.
That's an excellent point.
But,
And I think that goes
You know?
into next goal cycle. That needs to be a real tangible thought process that we put into our goals as to how to make this decision easier. And we all knew this was going to be a confrontational conversation when we made this budget, or when we made the town council goals, it was brought up, this was going to be a confrontational conversation. And the reason we're having these amount of meetings about this topic is because we have people who care very much about the town.
There is a motion on the table that's been seconded.
Do you want to
And
restate that
Kind of
motion?
gone off.
Yes, my motion was to fund the Bickford Chesley House at the original agreement of $400,000.
And I second.
We've second?
just to clarify, that $400,000 has already been allocated in the past, so you don't want to allocate an additional $400,000.
That is correct.
We're referring to what's been done historically.
That's correct.
Essentially, it's doing what the town council approved to do in prior years.
That's correct. Now, this does not preclude a further conversation for reinforcing the restoration. But as of this budgetary year, yes, I am saying at the 400,000.
Can I ask one quick question?
It's not 400, there is no 400,000 for this, in other words, you're saying the 400,000 has already been set aside.
Right.
So it's zero. Would come from this council this year.
Roger that, Mayor.
Right.
So,
So option 2, option 1, we would just eliminate that entirely from what the council's approving. There'd be nothing new allocated in 25 for Wagon Hill Farm. We'd have to work with what's already been allocated and with the LCHIP funds.
Roger.
any more discussion?
Well, Rich had a clarification or a question?
No, I think it was covered. I just wanted to ensure that it's 400,000 roughly. I think it's actually a little bit more than 400,000 in our capital, report. It shows a little bit more than that, but also inclusive of the LCHIP and the Moose Lake grant. I just wanted to ensure that that was included.
In addition to the 400,000?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Would
and let me
that
make
be
sure.
enough to stabilize the building?
That was the follow-on.
And would, and if that were the amount, I mean, what are the, is there a chance that the Moose Chip grant or the LCHIP grant would have to be returned?
That is a concern because my understanding is that the LCHIP grant is based on, on the town renovating the building to a sufficient extent that at least some of it would be usable to the public. So I think that providing zero additional funding would put the LCHIP grant at risk.
So we.
The public is already using the burn.
No, but the grant is not for the barn. That's not historic any longer. It's for the house and the L. But Rich spoke with the LCHIP people and can perhaps clarify.
Yeah, to answer your first question about stabilization of the building, there would be stabilization of the building. There would not be occupancy of the building. We would still have no life safety, no fire suppression. Those types of things would not be included within. No lavatories. That would all be outside of the outside of what I'll call option 0, which is basically just the existing funding plus the LCHIP plus the Moose Plate grant. We had some initial conversations with LCHIP and asked exactly this question. There's a process that they have at the agency which we would have to go through, and the grant officer had indicated that she believes that the LCHIP grant would still this would be eligible for the L-CHIP grant. But she says that the committee would be the ultimate determination, have the ultimate determination if there was a major change in scope or vision that might jeopardize that grant. So it's too early to tell at this point if that would happen. She felt somewhat comfortable that we would still have funding from L-CHIP available to us, but she is not the she's not the final authority.
Call the question.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I apologize. I didn't get it in the calendar, it was mentioned on notice. Had I been here, I would have voted for item 3. May I say something?
Sure, we're still in the discussion phase here, I think. Oh, they
because
called the
it's-
question, though, so no. The answer would be no. We called the question parliamentarian. Can we go back to discussion? Or do we
It's called the question, so we need to have a vote.
We do, yeah. So I'll start. Sally Nadell, nay.
Joe Friedman, nay.
Wayne Burton, nay.
Eric Lund, nay.
Darrell Ford, nay.
Curtis Register, nay.
Heather Grant, nay.
We lose,
There's
Ends
M.
back.
You're next.
You're next.
You're next.
James Bubar, nay.
M. Friedrichs, nay.
What did M say?
Nay.
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 So
So it's
fails unanimously.
So I move that we choose to use option 1 for the Bickford Chesley House, which will allow us to do the work that will preserve the grant money and use funds
I
from the
second.
unrestricted budget. Is there a second? Second from Curtis.
Council Register.
Yes.
After what Rich said, are you positive that that will preserve the L-CHIP fund?
That's Rich.
Option 1?
Option
Yes,
1.
After what Rich said.
I think option 1 has a better chance and will reflect better on the town's kind of position going forward on the project.
It's a better chance, but it's not guaranteed.
It's not guaranteed, but it's highly probable.
And option 2 is significantly more than what the L-CHIP grant was for and what we've already put aside. By $342,000 more than option 1 even. So it's not an insignificant amount the town would be putting into that property. And it would be, I would expect, you would expect, I think, the L-CHIP people say that the money is being used for what it's intended, and the end result is a preserved home there.
You said 2,
Option 2.
but you said 1, right?
Yes, I did initially, and then I just did option 1.
Yeah.
So
Right, so-
the vote on the table is option 1.
Right.
Right,
I'm just
right.
saying, it's still a significant amount of money, even though it's $342,000 less than.
Oh, okay.
I mean, what we're hearing is option 2 would definitely pass muster, but
Okay.
that's significantly
Right.
more than what.
Right. But at the
We-
same time, if we do not approve any alternative, then option 2 is what is currently in the budget. So that's what would go through if we do not approve either option 1 or option 3.
And a clarification, the difference between options 2 and 1, if we do approve option 1, was $342,000 less for option 1, but that's not available really to reduce the tax rate.
So I believe it's 372.
Okay?
But, so if the council made that reduction and wanted to use $372,603 in fund balance, which is the difference, to simply reduce taxes, the council could do that. The challenge is, next year, unless we want to continue spending $372,000 to keep the tax rate at that level, we'd see a blip.
I would just quit, because we're not really using it to reduce taxes, we're using it to reduce the
The
budget.
increased rate, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, without it,
Either-
the taxes would
well, either way.
increase.
It's
And
semantics,
I'm just
you know?
saying.
You can't
Using
keep
it to
it
reduce the tax
forever,
rate,
yeah.
Period.
So, but you can do it. It
Madam
just- it
Chair, are
just-
we voting, we're going to vote on the budget next week, right?
We don't
This is-
ever vote on the budget. We only vote on amendments to the budget.
Okay, this is the work session.
This work session. Next week, in an ideal world, we would have the budget done, but we won't. At the rate we're going, I suspect that's not the case, in which case then we will probably need to add maybe additional meetings.
And again, I apologize profusely for being late. I have to say, in the past, when a budget came in high, we had considerable public comment on it against the budget. We have had no one from the public come to our meeting to tell us they didn't like this budget, right? And so,
No emails.
if we really represent public sentiment, what's, I don't understand what's going on, because, I mean, we had some really tough testimony in past years because of the people annoyed with the size of the budget. This year, we've had only positive testimony, especially on this project.
I would say I've had several conversations with people that say the tax rate is untenable for them.
I agree.
I have not.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
I'm just
the issue
pointing out
being
that-
that none of these people have either come to meetings in person or expressed that opinion in writing to the council.
Certainly, but I don't think it's too far-fetched to assume that less taxes is better for a high inflation period for our residents than more taxes would be. And I think if you were to pose the question, would you rather have this rate or this rate to a populace, I think we know that what the answer would be.
Oh, of course.
Sometimes people are embarrassed to write an email of that nature.
Yes.
I think we,
I don't disagree. I would just note that the council has kept the tax rate constant for 2 years in a row, despite the inflation we've been experiencing. So this would be the first year in 2 where we've seen an increase in the rate.
And let's be honest, people don't read enough emails, and they probably don't even know there's a change.
But while we held the tax rate constant, you said we added like another $1 million to the fund, according to the auditor?
We did last year, but again, that's not a reflection of the rate. It's a reflection of under-expending appropriation or bringing in revenue beyond what we anticipated. And we benefited from higher interest rates in terms of interest. Interest rates are now coming down, and that will impact the interest we'll earn in the coming year on our funds.
And I will say that although the tax rate was flat because of the increase in assessed value, the amount that people are paying in taxes was not flat. There was a significant increase.
Well, no.
Well, for some.
For some, but not all. Some went up, some went down. It depends.
The revaluation was in 2023, and your 2023 tax bill reflected that. So, so 2024 was using the same valuations as 2023, and so the town's tax rate was kept constant, and
And the
some
valuation.
and the valuation, unless you did some substantial improvement to your house, should have
Right.
remained
It was,
constant.
the revaluation was not responsible for keeping the tax rate constant. It was.
No, the revaluation took place before the 2023 tax rates were announced. And the 2024 tax rate, the town portion is the same as 2023. Some of the other components actually decreased, so that, at least in my case, I paid less in property tax this year than last year, and I would expect that for most people, that would be the situation, unless you did substantial improvements to your property, which would have increased your assessed value.
Yeah, and I didn't bring up keeping the tax rate constant for 2 years in a row as a reason not to work hard to bring this next rate in as low as possible. I just wanted to create some context that the council has been working to stabilize the rate, and we were successful last year.
Right, and in some respects, that's catching up to it because we kept a constant budget rate in a period of high inflation, and now that's being reflected in the fact that we have to raise salaries both to keep up with an inflation and in order to attract and retain positions like police and firefighters.
And on that topic, please remember, next year we'll be negotiating not one contract, but 3 that will hit for the following year. So I foresee additional increases coming as a result of those contract negotiations in an effort to keep our employees at Public Works, Fire Department, and middle managers equitably paid.
So we're still on a vote
Can we call the
for,
question?
Actually, I thought Councilor Burton wanted to jump in here at some point.
No,
You
well,
change your mind, or?
good for you. I went up $2,000 here. No, I just was, and I'm not trying to, I just reflecting back on previous times when we had this dilemma, that it was usually because we had the public here at hearings addressing certain issues in the operating, this is not an operating budget item, the Chesley, it's not. So, and I'm not questioning who you're talking to, but it's just odd that we haven't heard. Now remember, I point out that some of the more recent residents coming to Durham have paid a lot more for their property than I did in 1973 or 4.
right, or even that I did in 1998.
And they knew what I don't know, it's I'll put it this way, it's a wealthier town than it was certainly when I started here. But I think to Todd's credit, we have hit the budget every single year he's been here. And not gone over the budget. That's why we have a surplus. So I trust Todd's judgment, and because he's hit that budget every single year. And the council, a couple of times, the council did change something because we had public testimony about OOIA. I remember was one, and there were some others that. But every counselor has to vote their conscience, and
At the last
So-
meeting, we had a brief discussion about equalization and the expectation that the property valuations of the commercial properties will most likely go down as a result of that process. But that won't actually impact the budget until '26?
No,
If that occur, I mean, I'm assuming that that's going to occur in '25.
it would impact in '25.
It would.
It would, yes. So
Yes.
So in addition to your 3 contracts, which are going to be going up something greater than 0.
and those will impact in '26.
We're also going to see a decline on the commercial side. And I go back to, we've got to start cutting now. If you're going to get that trend line down, well, you all got a real problem next year.
We have a
We have a motion on the table.
Could I call the question, please?
Would you like to start?
Would I like to start? I'd be happy to start. Darrell Ford, nay.
Eric Lund, nay.
Wayne Burton, nay.
Joe Friedman, aye.
Sonia Dell, nay.
James Bubar, nay.
Heather Grant, nay.
Curtis Register, aye.
Pam?
And Friedrichs, aye.
So that's 3 in favor and 6
No.
against.
Opposed.
So it fails.
So the motion
So-
fails.
So, yeah, I personally think that and there seems to be a definite divide in terms of whether you have somebody at the house or not in terms of a caretaker. I just think that this is still a home, and it's an empty home, and it's an empty old home, and leaving those kinds of buildings empty is not a good thing for the home itself. I think it requires care, and it requires somebody to be on the property, and that's why I think we should go for option 2.
And I concur with Councilor Grant.
So I'd like to make a motion to go with the current budget on option 2 for the Chesley House.
For that.
We don't really need a motion, but
It's
I want to
already
get.
in there.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah,
well,
it stays, but-
it was already,
I moved.
yeah, it was already moved and failed, but we
can
can move to
re-
reconsider, which I will make a motion to reconsider the vote on option 2.
I believe it's somebody that voted nay needs to move to reconsider.
No.
Yeah, the motion failed 4-4, so somebody who voted aye, which I did, can make this motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, so between the two of you, we have a motion and a second. Do you want to start?
Well,
Heather Grant, aye.
Can we discuss
Oh,
the
just more.
motion?
Well,
We've already discussed it, though.
We had it, we
Not
weren't
all
here.
of us.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
But Wayne wasn't here.
well, I know, it's fine.
I'm
Wait,
s- No, that's okay.
Yeah, if you
The
have a
new
statement.
motion.
There's discussion. Go ahead, Wade.
I just got to point out that my calculations, option 3 is $151,147 more than option 2. And quite frankly, folks, I'm just sick of walking around for 30 years, Wagon Hill Farm, almost every day, and nothing has been done that of substantial to make that site what it could be.
It's 900,000 more.
So I am, and it's not coming out of the operating budget. It's coming out of the reserves. It does not affect the tax rate. And I think it's time to fish or cut bait on this and do it right now. Otherwise, it's going to sit there. And so that, and I apologize for not being here earlier, but that's my feeling. So if I should vote no on this one, it's because I want 3.
You're going to have a tough time.
You can always add that later.
Consider what you're hearing from people at the table when you make that choice.
All right, in a perfect world, I would want option 3 as well, but I'm recognizing that in this budget environment, that was not realistic.
I also would like to add that these are not going to be the end costs. This is not the scope of what this project is going to actually cost. And I think it's important to understand that we're pursuing option 2, and that's great, but this is the going in, optimistic idea. And it's 3 times the original cost, and it's still optimistic.
Yes?
It's the best data we have right now.
I understand, Todd.
All right, ready to vote? We'll start with Councilor Lund.
Eric Lund, aye.
Wayne Burton, no.
Joe Friedman, no.
Sonia Dell, aye.
James Bubar, nay.
Heather Grant, aye.
Curtis Register, nay.
M.
And Friedrichs, nay.
And Councilor
Councilor
Ford.
Ford.
Darrell Ford, aye.
So it's 4 in favor, 5 opposed, so it fails.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily change anything.
Doesn't change anything because that's what's in the budget by default. But
Right, unless there's another motion.
Definitely another motion, Wayne?
That's it.
You want to move?
I think you want option 3.
I move we adopt option 3 for the capital improvement program at Wagon Hill Farmhouse.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Councilor Ford seconded, all right. Discussion.
I think it could be phased in at another time, just my opinion.
Yes?
If the council wants to move forward with option 3, that's wonderful. I would just caution that we really have not spent a lot of time specking out how the facility would be used on a year-round basis and other particulars associated with that. And those are all reasons why I didn't recommend option 3. So I don't recommend option 3, but if you want to do option 3, go for it. It's great. And it'd be wonderful. I guess the other caution I would have on option 3 is Right now, the barn inside has a certain character, which I think is really lovely. It's historic looking. It's not historic in practice, but looking, it's sort of a natural, rough-hewn appearance. If we winterize it, then that means insulation and drywall, and it'll tremendously change what the interior would look like as well. But if we did do option 3, we'd have the opportunity to do some type of a very special interpretive display on one of the walls. But again, we haven't really priced that out either, and perhaps we could raise money to offset the cost of that, but there are a lot of unknowns there. So that's...
Any other discussion? Ready to vote? Sure. Sally Nadell, nay.
James Bubar, nay.
Heather Grant, nay.
Curtis Register, aye.
Darrell Ford, nay.
Eric Lund, aye.
This is the motion to go to...
To go to
Option
option
three.
3.
Wayne Burton, aye.
Joe Friedman, nay.
Councilor
Ken
Friedrich?
Friedrichs, nay.
So that motion fails 4 to 5.
No, it was three in favor, 6 opposed, I believe.
5-4.
Jeff,
Nay, 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 nay.
who voted
I
yea?
got 3-6.
I had 3-6.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Councilor Register.
I voted aye,
Voted
Lund
aye.
voted aye, and Burton voted aye.
Right, 3.
Okay.
So it fails 3-6.
Okay, so
So the proposal remains intact, option 2, unless the council changes.
I would like to propose that we cut the library budget by 10%.
Is that a motion?
I think so, yes.
Well, you have to make it as a
You have to make it as a
I
motion.
move that we cut the library budget by 10%.
There you go, buddy.
Is there a second?
I'm sorry, can I retract that? I move that we cut the town's contribution to the library by 10%.
Is there a second?
I'll second it for discussion purposes.
Okay. Discussion. Everybody's madly looking through their books, so.
How much does that equal? Do you happen to know?
That's around, I think, 60,000 in that neighborhood.
the proposed budget for the library is $655,683, so a 10% reduction on that would be 65,000 something.
Yeah, the net funded by taxpayers was 635, so it would be 63, 63 and a half.
63 and a half.
So I would just note that that will impact operations, it will impact staffing, which will have an impact on hours of operation.
It could impact their activities for donations, and it could impact the trustees' contributions to the library.
It could, I don't believe the trustees have the capacity to offset that.
There is a separate library
And
revenue
through
expenses
fundraising.
tab.
And to be able to do it,
Yeah,
Presumably
towards the back,
every year.
starting page 183 is the cover letter.
So the 10% is $63,568.
63,500. I have trouble with those smaller numbers.
Madam Chair?
yes.
The problem with this is, and I understand the spirit, we don't get a chance to speak to the librarians, we don't get a chance to get information on how it's going to impact services at the library, and I think it's unfair to, at this point...
I actually made that comment when the librarian was here
Yeah.
and suggested they could charge for some of their programs and that there were various things they could do. And there was a lot of pushback that we have a moral obligation or something to the community. And I guess I'm worrying about those who are struggling on the 2.5% increase in their projected Social Security.
Yeah.
And somehow we've got to cut $460,000 out of this budget.
No, we don't. We don't have to.
Yeah, we don't have to.
That's
It is our
correct. You
goal
don't have
Well, we
to,
could just
but-
vote, we just need to vote on it, right? We vote no or we vote yes?
We
Or
can, or discussion. if
We
you
haven't
want
even,
some
has
discussion.
anybody seconded it?
Yes, Emily did.
Em did.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to hear your rationale for, number one, cutting it.
Well-
Number two, the 10%. Why not 8%? Why not 12?
I have yet to see, I'll do it backwards. I've yet to see a budget that can't be cut 10% and still deliver the services in the budget. That's my experience.
In this
budget.
town?
And the first one is, what was your first question?
Your rationale?
Rationale, we need to cut the budget, in my opinion, that we're on a trend line that is dangerous, that everybody loves free stuff, that they have an excessive amount of building space there that's not being utilized fully. They are running all sorts of daycare programs that are not collecting funds, and so that there are services there that they could use to generate revenues.
Could you explain the daycare part
After-school programs?
at the library on a regular basis?
That's my understanding.
They don't run a daycare per se, but they do have after-school activities for folks to jump in.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's the role of a library.
Absolutely.
In a community. And there are people in the community that depend on the library for the access that they need, and the information that they need. So I have a hard time thinking that taking 10% from the library versus 10% from some other department, it seems random. I think that my experience in terms of going to meetings there, and I may have said this at the last meeting, is I go because there's a presentation by the Conservation Commission. I go there because there's a presentation or a discussion with the people who worked at the election. There's no money to be made in those kinds of meetings.
We're charging ourselves.
And we're charging ourselves. And Cheryl Bass pointed out that they actually don't open up the space to groups that are not nonprofit. So I feel like it would be a very obvious way that we were taking away from the community by taking away a service that many people use. And it's a community building.
However, there was no, when we asked how many unique users there were, we didn't really get a straightforward answer to that.
They don't track it.
They don't.
That's right.
They could tell us how many, that their usage has gone up dramatically.
People love free stuff. I don't disagree with
I
that.
mean, we could
Well,
charge
they
for
know how
Jackson
many
Landing too
library
if we wanted.
cards
Pardon?
we have.
We could charge for Jackson Landing too if we wanted.
That would be fine.
Council Bubar, you picked this one on purpose, I know.
It's his-
I know what you're doing,
It was just
and
an
it's-
easy,
and that's
it was
interesting.
low-hanging fruit.
However, if you're going to do this, we need to delay the vote on the budget until the public gets a chance to digest the fact that we might cut the library budget 10%. Or we might cut fire, we might cut other things. And so the public can weigh in now. So some of the people who you haven't heard from yet, come in. I remember the fight to get that library out of the parking lot where it is now and try to get it up to speed. And I'm
And all
really
the
happy. it is.
residents have access to
But
the
if you're gonna-
library
if you're gonna
up
do,
at the
if you're going
university.
to propose things we know are going to raise hackles in town, we've got to get the public a chance to respond. I would do that in my organization, you would too. Because we don't want to, first of all, it's not going to pass, but anyway.
I know.
I know you know, and that's why you're doing it.
No, that's not the only reason I'm doing it.
Anyway, let's vote, get it over with.
Calling the vote? Calling the question?
I know I'm not, but I wouldn't want to cut anybody off, but you can, Madam Chair.
No, does anybody else have other comments to make? Okay, I'll call the question then. So the motion is to reduce the library budget by 10%. I vote Sally Adele, nay.
Joe Friedman, nay.
Wayne Burton, nay.
Eric Lund, nay.
Darrell Ford, nay.
Curtis Register, nay.
M. Friedrichs?
Nay.
She chickened out. James Boomer, aye.
Okay. It did not carry.
Even without Counselor Grant in the room, it fails 1-7.
All right. Back to the drawing board. Does anyone have a motion to make about something change they would like to see made in the budget?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Can I just, before you adjourn, can I just point out one thing?
No, there's
No, you
no
can't
discussion, I'm
actually.
sorry.
Yeah, motions to adjourn cannot be,
just vote no.
cannot be discussed, just vote nay.
Would you like to start, Council
Can we-
Register?
can we-
Curtis Register, aye.
Can we wait for Councilor Grant? Okay.
Sure.
There's no rush.
No, there's no rush.
Get back here.
The motion is to adjourn. How would you, so we're starting our vote.
Yeah, so
Council Register.
Curtis Register, aye.
Darrell Ford, nay.
Eric Lund, aye.
Oh, Wayne Burton, aye.
Joe Friedman, nay.
Sonia Del, nay.
James Bubar, aye.
Heather Grant, nay.
M?
Nay.
Somebody keeping track?
4 to 5.
5-4,
5-4.
nay.
You'd think you guys were drinking whiskey before you came to this meeting. It's like,
So it
did we ever
So-
vote on the
so we are still
library?
meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Adjourn
keeping, okay.
Failed?
Oh, good Lord, yes.
Are we still making budget motions, or what are we
Well,
up to?
if there are no budget motions to be made, and we are done, then we could,
But,
we can go
Well,
back.
can I,
Yes, but if you have something you'd like to add, please.
yeah, on page 44, we have 15,000 in surveys. It says Meadows property and potential others, 15,000. Motion to remove that from the budget.
Whose budget is that in?
Land stewardship?
Conservation.
Conservation.
Conservation, which is land
Yeah,
stewardship.
well,
Yep.
Yep, and our rep is Councilor Burton.
What?
For the surveying. Do you have any comments about the paying for
Right.
surveying coming from conservation?
Right, which this is one of the items under the contracted services.
Right.
Survey the Meadows property. Is that the property that goes down to the river?
Right next to the
Yes.
garden.
Yeah, it's right across
I don't
from the
think it's
dam,
been
behind and
discussed
back.
in, is it what?
It's the Meadows property.
Yeah, but it hasn't been discussed while I've been on conservation, is that what you're asking?
So I
Well,
don't
I
know
don't
whether,
you know,
does anybody know if the survey money was already put aside for the Jackson Landing survey?
yes.
That's all
So it's
done,
already been
isn't it?
spent? It's already been done? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Right.
was this year. I think it was like
Yeah.
Yep.
4,000 or something for that one.
Madam
Yes.
Chair, can I ask a question? If we don't act on the budget, what option for the Wagon Hill Farm will be?
It'll be as written, option 2.
Yeah.
Option 2 will be the option.
Option 2 is the
Yes.
default. A comment on that item, town administrator decreased surveys to 10,000. 15,000 was the number originally
Oh, okay.
proposed by the department head.
So it's been reduced to 10,000?
Yeah, there's a note in the budget, just
Yeah.
Okay, so,
wanted to point that out before we voted on the motion. Unless there's,
Wait,
somebody's willing to make a motion to amend the motion.
Wait, are you saying it was reduced after it was
Right.
presented?
So, yeah,
Yes.
Counselor Grant got the $15,000 number from it being called out in the narrative for that line item, and below that, there's a further note that the town administrator reduced that amount to 10,000.
The department head had proposed 15.
Yes, sir.
The budget you have before you has 10.
Okay, so it's 10, yeah.
Yeah,
Right. I mean,
But you're saying...
44, page 44.
yeah, page 44, it's under Contracted Services Conservation Committee.
I believe, maybe it was at the last meeting, someone explained why the surveying of the meadows was a reasonable
Yeah.
thing to do.
Did that motion get seconded?
so do you,
Yes,
Do you want me to-
can we get,
whatever.
is it okay if we take a minute for Todd to explain why there's that $10,000 there?
Yeah, that would be part of the discussion.
so I'm sorry to step out, I had to use the facilities for a moment. So We do have many properties the town has acquired over time where there was not a survey that was done. So it creates some lack of certainty on where our boundaries actually lie. That was causing some issues at Jackson's Landing, for example, because some of the neighbors were and continue to dump leaves and yard debris on what we believe to be the town's property. And
Yeah, as those of us who toured
Right.
Jackson's Landing this morning saw for
Right,
ourselves.
so our plan there is once the monumentation is in place, we'll reach out to the owners to show very clearly where the line is and definitively tell them to stop. But without the survey showing where the boundary is, it was a little questionable. At the Meadows property, when we acquired that parcel, there were not definitive boundaries in place. We did have an issue with the abutting landowner on one of those boundary lines, and we came up with a line that the town believes to be accurate, and we've put stones along what we believe to be that line, which probably is the line, but we're not certain. The abutter's not contesting that at this point in time. So ideally, it would be nice to fully survey that property. Originally, $15,000 was recommended based on some prior survey estimates we had gotten a year ago for Jackson's Landing, but what we found was the pricing came in more reasonably than we thought it would be. So that caused us to reduce the projection to $10,000. Now, if the council wants to reduce that as a cost savings, it will simply mean the boundary survey will not take place next year. Will that be the end of the world? No. We will carry on, and we will target surveying that at a future year. I would recommend we survey it, and we're slowly trying to incrementally move around to our various holdings where there are not boundary surveys to have the surveying done, and the Meadows was the next on our priority list. That's why it's there. But if you make that reduction, it will just mean we don't do the survey next year, and we'll carry on as we have for the last 3 or 4 years.
So do we have a second for,
I will second that. It was in my list of suggested items to reconsider.
Can I ask about that property? Is there,
second?
did she just second it?
Did you just seconded? Okay.
Yes.
That property is that conservation land forever? Or is there any future use to that property for the town?
It's, in essence, yes, it's not necessarily conservation land, but you can't build on the front portion of it in a way that would impact the viewscape. There's an easement on the property which prevents construction there. So the issue or prompting the need for a survey was just so we clearly know what the boundaries are with respect to the neighbor. But again, for the time being, we're not in active dispute with the neighbor. Everybody's comfortable with the boulder line we've placed at that site.
Is it possible to use that land as an in-town community garden?
It is already. There's already an active garden, community garden there. Dennis Meadows was involved with that, and that was, Wagon Hill Farm was the primary site, this was a secondary site. So it exists now.
Right.
In that particular
And just to clarify this, it's identified as the Meadows property. Is that Dennis Meadows?
Yes.
Well, we call it the Meadows. Originally, Dennis Meadows purchased the property and then donated it to the town of Durham. And we called it the Meadows in his name, and it is a meadow as well. So it was a play on words.
Okay.
Very clever.
Is the waterfront access anything that anybody in town would use for anything?
Well, we have thought over the long term about potentially building a bridge from the Meadows property to the Milne property on the other side. And it would be helpful to know for certain where the boundaries are for that, but we're not in the process of doing that right now.
Right. That would not
Yeah.
happen until after the
Correct.
The dam removal is complete and the and the new stream bed is established.
Right.
Dennis called that the green necklace.
The string of pearls.
Green string of
So anyway,
pearls. Yeah.
so as we move on then, what,
Yes.
anybody-
Real quick question.
Dialogue.
Gail, the operating budget is $22,679,000. Is that correct?
Sounds correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So the motion is to reduce, or to remove the surveying of the Meadows property.
Right, which would
It's
be a
been seconded.
$10,000 reduction. Based
Any
on
other
that.
discussion before we vote? We can start here.
Heather Grant, aye.
James Flubar, nay.
Sonia Dell, nay.
Joe Friedman, aye.
Wayne Burton, nay.
Eric Lund, nay.
Darrell Ford, nay.
Curtis Register, aye.
Counselor Friedrichs?
Aye.
So that's 4 in favor, 5 opposed. Motion fails.
Yeah.
May I throw another motion out there?
Please.
I move that we cut the operating budget by 2% across the board.
I will second that motion.
Discussion?
Again, how much is that? Are you talking about?
$453,000.
It's very close to the amount that Councilor Friedman had asked, which would bring us to our budget goal was 468,000. So that's very close to bringing us within our budget goal.
That's correct.
463 now.
Yeah, 463 net of the
Minus
changes that were made last week. But-
And now 10,000 if,
No,
No,
that
didn't
motion
pass.
That did
failed.
not pass.
Madam Chair,
Yes, please.
where would the 2% cut show in the budget?
Every,
Every
Discussion
single
of
line
the
item will be
deficit.
cut by 2.
Every department would use their discretion to cut 2%.
with the exception of water and
Sure.
wastewater.
Is that the
Because those are
motion?
separate funds.
It sounded to me like you were going to make one cut.
I am making one recommendation.
That
The work will have to go back to the department heads.
But, yeah, it goes
Not-
back to the,
well-
goes back to the administrator.
Who would, didn't
He needs to figure out where the 2%
Roger that.
is from. And not the department.
So the motion, if
He
if
might
you want to do it,
delegate but-
right, the motion should be to direct the administrator to reduce the budget by 2%.
I would like
Otherwise,
to correct my
otherwise,
motion.
you're not in a position to micromanage this budget.
I mean, that's
None
what
of
we're
us
doing
are.
right now.
The
I was about ready to go
administrator
to
is.
my next
She's got
item.
to approve a budget that's 2% less than what's presented.
I move to direct the administrator to reduce the budget across all departments by 2%.
Is there a second?
I had seconded that, and I'm comfortable with the rewording.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with the rewording because he's telling Todd where to take the cuts from, and that he shouldn't, I think that's
do-
what he
Yeah, we
should
just said
Do you think-
6% overall, right?
We
No,
just
he didn't
did
say
that
that.
with the survey.
No.
What?
We just did that with the vote on the survey and cut the survey. That
Yeah,
was-
except that we didn't because that motion failed.
No, I know it failed, but we were telling him to cut this.
But it was
That's
a-
exactly what Curtis is saying, cut this by 2%.
I disagree.
Yeah,
but that also came in emails that was discussed and there was some conversation about that already, about cutting that
Right.
survey. So it's not like it's blindly picking something. That was, yeah, we could probably do that next year. It's not
That was a
critical.
specific item, and if he would like to make a specific item cut, that would be fine. But
We
he's
have not successfully made a cut.
Can I
yet.
finish? Thank you. And so if he wants to cut 2% from the budget, that's fine. I mean, if that's the motion. But he said he was directing the administrator to cut 2% from every budget. That's a different thing.
Then 2% from the gross budget.
Exactly. And that's my point.
My point is we have not found any item that we're willing to cut as a collective. And we are on course to increase costs for residents. I think we are charged with making some uncomfortable decisions. And if we can't do this line by line, then we need to raise the threshold that we're willing to find consensus on. And we've been here now for an additional day till 10 o'clock at night. We've had these conversations multiple times over the last 2 particular council periods, and I know I've had several conversations offline with multiple people about the implications of this budget. And so if we do nothing, That's totally fine. We will be okay. But some other people will not be okay. And if we're not willing to take a risk and reduce this rate, residents will have a harder time putting food on the table than is necessary, because we have the money in the budget to solve this, or we have the money in our funds to solve this problem currently. And if we're not going to do it artificially, we need to do it systemically with the budget.
Please.
I would just observe that we spend months and months developing a budget, weeks and weeks with the council discussing it and analyzing it. But how much time do we really spend looking at our zoning and how we might change our zoning to incentivize meaningful development
I love
that
it.
would offset the impact of taxes? We hardly spend any time at all. So I argue it's not a spending problem we have, it's a revenue problem.
I agree with
It's a
that.
tax-based problem. But we seem to be unwilling to have that conversation, and everything gets put on me, frankly, and then you, to solve it with the budget. And Councilor Bubar is correct, we have a systematic issue if that's the way we need to solve the problem. I would argue.
You either cut costs, you grow revenue,
You grow
or
revenue.
both.
I would argue, let's spend the
Ideally.
time. If we spent half the time we spent on the budget on growing revenue through zoning, bang, that's brilliant.
Right.
I got a
which-
draft just waiting. I've had it for 3 years if anybody wants to see it.
Well, I mean, the workforce housing overlay, which we've had first reading on, but not, and we had the public hearing on it, but we've not yet voted to adopt. That would be one of the things that we could do. It would not come in time to affect the 2025 budget, but it could realistically improve the outlook for 2026.
And 2027, because it's phased.
It may, often residential development can be on the border of whether it's over time going to broaden the tax base versus increasing costs to compensate those people. But broadening the commercial base does not put kids in the schools. It doesn't, it has minimal demand on services, but it broadens the tax base. So I
Right,
think
right.
it's important to think about that too. And so the edge, for example, is a real opportunity. And I think when we get into the PUD, for example, there'll be a lot of people who will say, oh, the buildings are too tall, they're too close to the street, they're too this, they're too that. And at a certain point, we've got to say, look, we've got to make ends meet. And there are a lot of things to consider other than just visual
Right, but
changes.
that's one of the tasks that the planning board is taking on.
We may need to be a little bit more involved.
Yes, yes.
I'd like
would
to
be
call the
helpful.
question. Given the hour, I'd like to call the question, and just to, Curtis, could you just clarify, did you mean a 2% cut in the total operating budget to be made at Todd's discretion, working with the department heads? Or
that's-
were you calling for a 2% in every department?
Very well. I will leave it more to the administrator's discretion, and we'll say 2% from the total.
So I'm
Okay.
comfortable seconding that, and hopefully can vote on that now.
We do vote on it now. So, would you like to start?
Sure, aye.
Okay, M started.
This is a hard one. Heather Grant, aye.
James Bubar, aye.
Sally Adele, nay.
Joe Friedman, nay.
Wayne Burton, nay.
Eric Lund, nay.
Darrell Ford, nay.
Curtis Register, aye.
Okay, so that was 4 in favor, 5 opposed, so the motion fails.
Ground fight.
I do have another line item to question if you
That's
still want
fine.
to talk about it,
That's
because I
fine.
still think
We're
nobody's
still here.
going through, I mean, we had like all these conversations and emails
Yeah.
going back and forth, and it's just kind of frustrating that nobody's getting in the details, so it's driving me crazy.
Yeah,
I'll go to another one.
so
Yep.
Go ahead.
Page 58,
Maybe a reason.
this is under the executive town council, it has contingency council. And we've put in 125,000, yet we've never done, and so unless there's some specific issues that need 125,000, it seems like we could cut that by 75,000.
Yeah, the largest number that's showing in the history is 67,000 and change, so I'd be comfortable reducing that number by 50,000, but I think we'd be taking a risk to cut more than that.
Wait, has it been seconded? Do we second this motion? Is there a second for the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you.
So,
How much are we cutting?
I said 70, 75.
Yeah,
so my answer to that, or my response is simply that the $125,000 represents 0.05%, or 0.05% of the whole. 0.05, it's 0.5%. And the goal of that money is to cover unanticipated things, problems that come up over the course of the year, with a philosophy that our budgets are tight and allocated toward meaningful projects. So if the fire truck again has the breakdown, or we run into overtime at the fire department like we ran into, or any number of unanticipated things happen across our different departments, this allows us to address them. And
But so
if-
does the other fund account, that you would be taking all that money for the
No,
farm.
because the money in the undesignated fund balance is not expended unless the council votes
to
to
approve it.
expend it. And so it's not available to us to utilize to address unanticipated issues over the course of the year.
But isn't, what's, that fund is identified as being related to what?
I don't understand.
So you have 125 there, so you're just basically saying that's part of a slush fund?
well, does it include if we have a legal
Because that's
Yes.
issue? If we have a
illegal.
legal issue
It's-
and we need,
Well,
planning
that's-
board's the same way. a
Yes, it
legal
could
issue.
be legal issues in excess of what's the norm. It could be abatements in excess of the norm. It could be unanticipated equipment breakdowns or leaks in buildings or any number of things. So
Right.
it's to address the unanticipated, and it gives us some very modest flexibility within the whole to address those things. And if we don't need to spend them, we don't, and that washes into the fund balance at the end of the year. And in
Right.
many years,
Which apparently nothing ever comes out of the fund balance.
no, it's, again, it's-
But I'm just saying that's what,
It is in this.
so if we add up like two more of these, you've got 100,000 off your gap. That's all I'm
Oh,
saying.
yes,
Because then you got another in here for 85,000 on page 80. I mean, maybe that, what's that? I'm just saying that if everybody is serious about trying to do something, there's several line items. You want to get 100,000, or you just want to say, walk away and we're at the 400 gap? Because that's what you're having to do. You're either going to smather everything, or
What are you seeing
Or
on
walk
page
away.
8? What are you seeing on page 80?
What
No,
line
it's-
item?
just
Oh.
if we're going to continue in this way.
page.
Hit page 80.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. So did we want to vote for that one, though? One way or the
We're
other?
asking you which item.
The 125,000.
Right.
It's page
Oh, but
58,
then you
line
switched it.
item
Right.
10,
We got that.
TAC 4130.
We got that, but she said there was another.
Oh, I was just going to go to the next one.
One of the similar
Because he
magnitude
said that
you on
wasn't very
page-
much, so
You said on page 80.
So did you withdraw
I'm just
your
going to go
initial?
one by one, because otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, let's first vote on the motion on the table regarding the council contingency fund.
Did we have a second?
Yes. Yeah, I'm only
James
seven.
Bubar, seconded.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, okay.
And was that, just clarification, was that removing it, decreasing it? What was the?
Yeah, it's.
58.
Page 58
$75,000 reduction.
of the operating budget, not the CIP. You're looking in the wrong book.
58.
So reducing it to $50,000.
That's correct.
Because there's, historically, that's more than what we've used, 20,
Well, no, not.
well,
well, 2023, average it all out and it adds up to
yeah,
about
it
that.
depends on the year. It's all very year-specific. Yeah. Basically, without that, if we run into unanticipated things, then we're pulling from operations to try to stopgap the problem, which is pulling away from something else.
And
So it gives us that flexibility.
is the converse of
That's
that,
why I always make
that if we do not have any contingencies, that money won't be spent and go back into the fund balance?
Well, wait, can you say that again?
If we don't have any contingencies requiring those funds, and they're unspent, they'd just go back into the fund balance,
They do,
right?
yes.
So,
But, correct me if I'm wrong, if that occurs and you've exceeded the 50,000, can't you at that time come to the council and ask for
supplemental.
authority to expend from the undesignated fund?
Yes, we could. We could come to the council. The council would have to have a public hearing, and then the council could vote to allocate the funding. It's additional bureaucracy is what it is. And
Okay.
I think we've demonstrated over time, we don't spend those dollars unless they're needed. Gail always essentially items out how we have spent the dollars to be very transparent. So it's not, I don't view it as a slush fund in any way. It's to address legitimate issues that come up. So, and it gives us some flexibility without creating a bureaucratic issue for us. But you could reduce that, and it doesn't, off the bat, affect any program. Yes. I wouldn't recommend it.
Any more discussion?
You would or you wouldn't?
Would not. I would not. It's a
would,
very
you
small,
wouldn't change it.
it doesn't take much to eat the $125,000 up in the budget.
All right. And we do have 1 year within the history that's presented in the budget where we did in fact use more than 50,000 in contingency. That was in 2022.
Right.
Any more discussion?
My political history for 50 years has been that people always ask for more than they're willing to pay for in taxes, always. And so it's a tough job to balance that. This is a high expectation town, it really is. And I don't think everybody realizes how expensive it is to be high expectations, but that's, so I think the budget should go the way it is. And next week, we vote on it, right? There's a public hearing prior to
We've
No, we
had it already.
There's
We already had it.
comments
We've had it.
in the beginning. And again, it's odd this year because usually we do have comments on the budget. Now, I guess it's naive to think that everybody's satisfied with that. And they don't show up, they just talk to you and others. And I keep thinking that Todd and Gail combed every nickel out of this already
I agree.
that they could find, which was significant this year. And I think we should go in with the budget the way it's presented.
You could make that motion after this vote.
I have one more motion. We ready to vote on this one? All right. We'll start down here.
Heather Grant, aye.
James Bubar, aye.
Sonia Del, nay.
Joe Friedman, nay.
Wayne Burton, nay.
Eric Lund, nay.
Darrell Ford, aye.
Curtis Racer, aye.
M. Friedrichs, aye.
So it's 5 in favor, 4 opposed, so that passes. So that's a $75,000 reduction in that item.
So my motion is to hire 2 firefighters in 2025 to support the fire department and help them maintain their training.
How much?
Has to be in number, right?
It has, it's the cost of we get 2 for the price of 1. I don't know what the number is. Gail, do you know?
Not.
Plus fringe.
Right, plus benefits.
If you give me 2 minutes.
Sure.
Yeah.
voted no.
My motion to adjourn.
Fair enough.
I thought you were shooting.
I wanted to resolve that.
May I ask what we're doing right now?
We're figuring out what it would cost to hire 2 firefighters.
Okay.
Remembering that one of those firefighters will be paid for by UNH.
Roger.
We would still need to increase the budget by the full amount of the 2.
Right.
The revenue side would
And the
offset.
revenue side would offset it. Right.
So, so the cost for benefits for a firefighter is $107,200.
107, did you say?
107,200.
That does include benefits?
That includes benefits.
So 214,000?
Yes.
We'd be looking at.
400.
But we would get up 107,000 back
Ah, yeah.
from UNH. It's 50/50 with UNH.
I don't like making decisions that way. It sounds like free money, but I do like the idea of having 2 more firefighters. And I don't think you're going to see the whole impact of that in '25.
No, because they won't be hard enough.
I don't know how long it took them to hire the one that they
may
they
not see it
just
in
hired a week
26.
ago.
Yeah, I mean,
But it takes time.
it takes time.
It takes
It
time.
often happens. with
But if you
police.
don't make the motion tonight,
It doesn't
what would
happen.
happen until the end of '26?
Right. Yes, but it may or may not have an impact.
Right.
Yep. So it may be money not spent. Does that fund, does it go into,
We would go into the fire,
Department.
up to 2% goes into the fire department capital reserve.
right. So it's there for them to spend in whatever year. Okay, it doesn't go away.
What's the process for UNH if this council were to vote on that? The UNH just automatically pays it without review?
Yes.
I should know the answer to this question, but when they compute the tax rate in, whenever they do it, in the spring or summer, fall?
In the fall, in the fall.
What do they use for an expenditure? Do they use the budget number or the actual expenses?
The budget number.
The
Yeah.
budget number.
Yeah, it's expenditures minus revenues.
So it doesn't, so if we don't fill a position, we'll still pay taxes on that number, but it'll, at the end of the year, it would stay in the town's,
Go
Right,
to-
and we could apply it in
Right.
2026,
okay.
or for 2026.
Yeah, it would wash into the fire capital reserve equipment fund,
Yeah.
which then could be used
It'd stay in the fund balance.
for that fund.
Yeah, for that fund, there's specifics for the fire department.
Yeah.
It doesn't become general.
And is your reason for adding these is to reduce overtime? Is that part of the reason? Or-
Yes, and they used a lot of their training money, and they used a lot of overtime on I think the overtime alone, he said, well, he mentioned, it's on the order of $250,000,
I thought he said 500.
Yeah.
500,000
Right.
ultimately.
So
we're
would this
talking
reduce
about
that
100
by a similar amount?
over time. I mean, it's not, you only have one person, and they can only add, or 2 people, but you can only add 1 to a group each time. You can't just add a firefighter who fills in for all the overtime. Have
So
to
they
be part of
really
the
need
team.
4.
They need 4, so 2 and 2, so that the teams are the same size ultimately in 2 years.
Yeah. The way it would really help overtime is if we had 4 additional firefighters, 1 per shift, then we'd have 6 people on a shift, And if we had a firefighter who was out, we'd drop down to 5. We'd be willing to do that, so we'd still be at that 5-person shift. And we wouldn't have to fill it with overtime, which would be a benefit. But we've demonstrated it's more cost-effective to run the way we do now and to fill vacancies with overtime versus simply hiring 4 new people. But the challenge we're running into is the wear and tear on the crews, because they're just working a lot. So that would help them quite a bit. Now, if we moved into providing services to Madbury, then we run into a slightly different issue, because we really feel we need 6 people on shift all the time to cover Madbury. So then we'd have a 6-person shift, and if we drop below 6, we'd be covering the 6 with overtime. So we're kind of back to where we are.
But that's
now.
still
So-
kind of an unknown.
Right, and it's an
So
unknown,
we
so we
can't.
don't know. But for now, if we added 2 new people, we'd probably assign them to 2 of the 4 shifts. And on those 2 shifts, we would probably drop down to 5, and we'd save a little bit. But it would still be more expensive than the status quo.
Did you budget for a lot of overtime and this year? I mean, it may be that if we prove the 2 positions and the money's in the budget, could that money be used to cover overtime this year until the positions are filled?
Well, we have
buckets, though.
money budget, separate bucket budgeted for overtime, so we would charge it to that. We wouldn't expend this $214,000 until we had bodies in the house who we were paying.
Okay.
And it probably, I mean, it's mid-December now, so, realistically, we're not going to have anybody on board for at least 2 months, probably 3 months, and then it'll depend if they're certified or not, and if they're not, we'll have to send them to get the certification, so it takes some time.
Did the chief ask for more positions?
In his initial proposal.
Yes.
Yes, he asked for
Yes.
4.
He asked
right?
for 4 lieutenants and another deputy chief.
Right, and I cut all that out.
Thank you.
I mean, you can do it, adding them, and based on what Todd said about not hiring them probably for 2 to 3 months, you could say with a April 1st implementation date, that would save you $27,000 on each one, so that isn't such a big hit. Just an option.
But adding these positions will increase the projected
following
tax
years,
rate,
yeah.
right, for next year. That's money we don't have budgeted right now, and there's no offsetting revenue right now. So, and the reason I didn't fund them was to try to get to the council goal of not increasing the tax rate.
I do not know how appropriate this is, so you can yell at me and tell me to stop talking, but I am in favor of this if we direct the town administrator to pull from the unfunded deficiencies to offset the tax rate.
Of just
By how
this,
much?
or?
No, to our rate.
So we have a motion. I don't know if it ever got to the
Curtis is
second.
amending the motion.
I don't know that I can.
Can?
I don't think I can.
You
I
could-
was simply stating where my perspective
You
is.
can move to
That's
amend the
just,
motion.
that's just your comment.
Right.
Okay.
Well, if you move to amend the motion, then we can vote on whether you want the amendment or not. I think.
You can't do that.
Okay. I would like to make this a pork barrel? Is that what they
Friendly
call it?
amendment.
Yeah, motion amendment to tack on a direction to the town administrator to fund $463,000 from the unfunded deficiencies to offset the tax rate.
What about the 107?
Right, so
Well, we just pulled 75,000, so I need to
And we
add,
just added 107.
The parliamentarian would say that's not appropriate for this motion. It's,
very well.
Yeah, it's
If you wanna
it's not
do that,
germane. You can make a separate motion
Make
on
a
that,
separate
but-
motion after this one is voted on, but that's
I'll
not
have to
germane
vote
to this
no and then
motion.
vote yes. Like it.
Okay.
Then I would like to make a motion to amend this to be 1 additional position instead of 2.
Or less.
Okay, now we vote on that amendment.
Well, is there a second to that
Has to be a
amendment?
second.
Second.
Well, oh, she
So-
amended it, right?
Yes.
Not yet.
So we have
one
to,
position instead of two.
right. So we have to vote on the amendment to the motion first. Okay. So, for the amendment,
Did anyone second that? Did you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
Counselor Register did.
So Sally Nadell. I'm lost, what am I voting? Okay, so, just one, no, nay.
Joe Friedman, nay.
Wayne Burton, nay.
Eric Lund, nay.
Darrell Ford, nay.
Curtis Fraser, aye.
M?
M. Friedrichs, aye.
Counselor
Heather
Grant?
Grant, nay.
James Bubar, nay.
So it's 2 in favor, 7 against, so it fails. The amendment
Okay,
fails.
The amendment
Amendment
does. So
fails,
now,
so that
we
we're
vote
on
on the.
the original motion.
The original motion.
Original motion, sorry. And was the original motion seconded before we got into our discussion?
It was.
Okay.
It was.
And who did the seconding? Does anybody remember? That's all right. It'll,
I will second if we need to.
it's seconded, okay. Any further discussion before voting?
Could you restate the motion, please?
Restate the motion. I move that, that we set aside $214,400 for the hiring of 2 firefighters in 2025. Is there, and we have already had a second, I was just restating, I believe.
I would like to amend that motion, and I would like to amend that to being hiring 2 additional firefighters effective July 1st of 2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
And I believe that that will balance with the 75 to get us to a 0 approximate impact. And I also think that they'd be lucky to hire 2 firefighters before July 1st.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right, ready to vote?
On the amendment.
On the amendment. To take the original motion and have it not be in effect until July 1st, 2025.
Correct.
Does the proposer of the original motion want to make that part of?
Well, I'll wait and see. I think we can vote on the amendment. Sure, we start here.
This time of night, Councilor Burton should not be difficult. James Bubar, aye.
Sally Nadell, aye.
Joe Friedman, aye.
Wayne Burton, aye.
Eric Lund, aye.
Darrell Ford, aye.
Curtis Fraser, aye.
Heather Grant, aye.
M. Friedrichs, aye.
Okay.
Woo-hoo. So
It's
the
getting late,
amendment, so the
apparently.
amendment
Is
passed.
for, amendment passed.
So now you've got to vote on the,
On the original
The
motion,
original motion
as amended.
as
as amended,
as amended.
which is hiring 2 firefighters
Starting July
effective July 1st, 25.
Still have to
And
do it.
I think it stops there, right? That, right.
Yes.
And then there would have to be a subsequent motion to deal with the issue of the fund balance, using the money from the fund balance.
Yeah, if somebody wants to make that motion.
Oh, I will.
Okay. So we're ready to vote on
The
the
amended
original motion, the amended motion.
Amended motion.
Sally Nadell, aye.
Joe Friedman, aye.
Wayne Burton, aye.
Eric Lund, aye.
Darrell Ford, aye.
Curtis Fraser, aye.
Heather Grant, aye.
James Bubar, aye.
Counselor Friedrichs?
Aye.
Right, passes unanimously.
Okay.
Holy moly.
I would like to make a motion.
No, did Counselor Grant have another line item that she wanted to contest?
Go ahead, let Curtis do his and then,
Yeah, I would like to make a motion that we direct the town administrator to fund the discrepancy in the tax rate to our town council goal from the unfunded balance.
I'll second that.
Oh, well,
Do you mean the discretionary
The
fund?
discretionary fund,
Just
the
discretionary.
undesignated.
The undesignated fund balance.
Undesignated fund balance
Undesignated
to
The
cover
difference.
whatever would be needed to meet our council goal.
Correct.
And the council goal was the 3.4%. correct?
increase on the current tax rate.
On the current tax rate.
You might as well just allocate
Right.
the money. I mean, that's,
And,
That's what I've been trying to do.
right, and that, can I,
Yes,
and
please.
just to clarify, so right now, we're basing everything on the existing tax rate, and we're predicating a budget on the existing rate. If this passes, and it may, and that'd be fine, just as a point of information, once the statistical update is completed, the rate will actually change from that because the values will change.
But the statistical update wouldn't come until October, November timeframe, correct?
But that will affect the second half tax
I agree.
bill.
Yeah, I
Yes.
agree.
But what we're not doing is, these are my words, sort of artificially lowering the rate based upon projected uncertain future valuations. We're using current valuations to make our educated guess
Certainly.
as to the future.
But it's still an increase in the tax rate regardless of if we make our goal or not.
So was it seconded?
It was.
It was seconded, yes.
wait till the
Right.
escrow banks get this one.
So, may I ask a
Yes,
question? So
please.
Gail or Todd, would you know if we use more of the fund balance in this way? So not only paying for Madbury Road and paying for Wagon Hill Farm, but now paying for a gap in this 460 odd thousand. Will that affect our bond rating, do you expect?
I do not believe so.
No, it'll bring us to basically, it'll keep us at the top end of our stated goal, which is a healthy number. And the challenge we'll have is, if the council desires to keep the tax rate the same for '26, or a number that doesn't keep pace with the increase in spending, then we'll have a very difficult time hitting that rate without continuing to use some amount of fund balance to level things off.
Unless, as you said, there's more revenue from
Yes.
more development in town,
Correct.
perhaps.
Or
That's right.
cut in services.
Or cut in services, or something changes in the operational makeup of the town.
Kick the can a little harder.
What's happened?
Except we have a big fund balance.
All right, ready to vote? Sure, we'll start down here.
Curtis Register, aye.
Darrell Ford, nay.
Eric Lund, nay.
Wayne Burton, nay.
Joe Friedman, aye.
Cy Nadell, nay.
James Bubar, aye.
Heather Grant, aye.
M. Friedrichs, aye.
So there are
Okay.
5 in favor, 4 opposed, so it passes.
Okay.
So we've hit the council goal, basically.
That one.
I would like to propose a couple additional line items that might be simple.
First, we need to have a motion to extend the meeting past 10:30.
Oh,
I'd like to extend the meeting, or I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting till 10:45.
I'll second that.
All those in favor by raise of hand.
Oh, that
yeah.
has to be
Oh, sorry,
roll
because
call.
we still have, sorry, it was just procedural, but we can't do that. So, roll call.
Curtis Register, aye.
Darrell Ford, nay.
Oh, now you're ready.
Eric Lund, aye.
Wayne Burton, aye.
Joe Friedman, aye.
Cy Nadell, aye.
James Bubar, aye.
Heather Grant, aye.
Lisa, said-
M. Friedrichs, aye.
so one opposed.
Okay.
One opposed, okay.
Okay, you're on. Councilor Friedrichs, let's roll.
All right, so page 5, the new website this year, to remove that from the budget. And I'm going to just throw it a bunch together, and then I would welcome amendments if people feel strongly
You-
about
You
something.
can only do one at a time.
Okay, well.
So is there a second
Page
Second
5.
that.
to essentially not update the website? If there was an explanation that Todd shared online to that question? And
It was like-
Luke from IT had explained.
I'm sorry, do we have a second?
Oh.
We haven't had a second yet.
We haven't, no
I
second
did,
yet.
I seconded it.
Did you
Okay.
second this one?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I thought I did.
Well, you have now.
That's right.
So,
And I think at the last meeting, I thought Luke spoke to this. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're right.
He did, yes.
He did, that we will lose a lot by choosing to do nothing. But,
Well, I remember him saying that he was now more comfortable with that option because they were able to find a provider who could extend the life of the current website for now. Although there was some question about whether, particularly the archive of Friday updates, there might be some functionality impacted there, but they were able to find someone who could extend the life of the website, and with that new option, he felt better about extending the website currently.
I remember that as well. It seemed
Yes.
like it wasn't that big a deal anymore.
Well,
But
it.
I'm not an IT
We're making an
person.
becomes a
assumption
bigger problem
with this.
every year it's delayed.
I
But I
can-
agree, Luke was not,
He said
Terribly
He said he
upset.
could see a way forward.
yeah,
That's what he said.
yeah. But it's not a permanent way forward.
right, we're just putting it off.
Right, it's
No,
kicking
it's
the
inevitable.
can down the road another year.
Right.
Yeah, the they is the website company we utilize, and I will note, it's been a struggle working through this with them, and I don't have the highest degree of confidence in them or their ability to work with us through the year. So I could potentially see a problem arise over the course of '25 where we are very unhappy. So my recommendation would be, and continues to be, we fund it so we can continue to work toward finding a solution, so we don't find ourselves in a position where we lose services, et cetera. And again, the website is one of the single biggest ways we interface with the public, and we want to drive more people there, making it easier to find information versus the status quo, which I think is starting to really lag with technology.
So I'm reading from your explanation that you wrote, Todd. Says we've also been told to expect a drop in functionality as Civic Plus has not committed to bringing any module customization forward. For example, our Friday updates module, which simply replicates the latest Friday update to the site, will cease to function after this migration. As the site ceases to be updated, it becomes increasingly prone to cyber attack infiltration, which is less than optimal. And that's, there's a lot more here, but that was part of the explanation.
Yeah, and I think what M is outlining is that Luke, in particular with the cyber threat side of it, is more comfortable because the provider has indicated to Luke they found a way to address that part of it. But
Okay.
I'm more focused on the functionality and interface with the public today. But again, it's up to the council. It's a fair reduction, and potentially we can sort of limp, I would argue, sort of limp through 25 with what we have today, with the likelihood of some loss of functionality as they make the Friday updates portal not available and start to jettison some other sort of filing archive features that exist within the site, which.
So, but we're moving away, isn't that is the situation that we need this while we're changing to an improved platform, an improved company that we're using as services?
In essence, the company that manages the site offers a new proprietary product where it's probably the most cost-effective solution for us versus finding an alternate provider. But their current platform that we're on, they're no longer making upgrades to. And the customer service there is poor at best because they're trying to move everybody over to their new platform.
But you don't want to switch companies, even though it sounds like you're uncomfortable even with their new platform, may not provide service ongoing.
The new platform, I believe, will be average. To have a platform that is exceptional, we would need more than $45,000.
His
Luke
projection,
estimates it would be $65,000.
$50,000 to $100,000 to switch.
Right.
And,
Is,
yeah, go ahead.
is the security suite upgrades still going to maintain security for the website if we no longer fund this?
So I would want to question Luke further, but Counselor Friedrichs is right. Luke did indicate that he was notified there was some solution that the company came up with to address that.
But we don't have any tangibles on that decision.
No, this was breaking news as Luke was reporting it here, and it won't, the functionality will stay the same and begin to decline as modules are no longer supported by the company.
And normally, security updates are one of the first things that get declined when you have a loss of service. So in my understanding of the assumption here, we are increasing the risk of our site getting hijacked if we do not fund this.
I believe so.
Right, it's end of life. They're saying it's end of life at this point and won't be supported. Maybe supported for 6 months, but that's about it.
Yeah, the company's Civic Plus is who we use. And they have it's a good product, it's not a great product. But again, as crazy as in the interest of being budgetarily responsible, we're staying with them because that's the most cost-effective path. So this would allow us to do the update in '25, and I think it'll be an improvement over what we have now. So.
It's an update that we have to make eventually, so whether it's this budget or next year, it's not going to go away. It's not going to fix itself, so we'll pay for it eventually.
It'll definitely be needed in '26.
Yeah, but if you buy new sneakers, every 9 months instead of every 6 months, you are getting cost savings over time. And, I do feel that if Luke was okay with this change, then I think that I would trust the opinion of our IT department head. So the more that we can get wear out of what we have, that will be helping to bend the curve towards a sustainable budget.
Yes.
I just would point out, in terms of the council goals, one of the overt goals was to engage the public, and this is the way we do it the most. So I would argue it's important, but it's up to you.
Ready to vote?
Yeah.
Okay. Roll call, I'll start. Sonia Dell, nay.
Joe Friedman, nay.
Wayne Burton, nay.
Eric Lund, nay.
Darrell Ford, nay.
Curtis Register, nay.
M. Friedrichs, aye.
Heather Grant, aye.
James Bluebird, nay.
Okay, so 2 in favor,
7 opposed.
7 opposed, so it fails.
All right, and what was your other line item?
You had,
You have another one, Em?
Yeah, well, let's discuss the, page 4, the blinking crosswalk in front of Mill Plaza. My concern with that at this time is that Mill Plaza is planning some significant improvements to the parking lot that could potentially change traffic and pedestrian flow. That crosswalk was identified as being a poorly placed crosswalk. It's too close to the intersection coming down from Main Street. So I don't think.
It's number
that
11 on
this-
page 4.
Number 11 on page 4.
So I don't think that this year it makes sense to be putting that investment in that particular place. And I think we're still learning about whether there was significant return on investment in the blinking crosswalks that we've already done.
I second that.
Just to note, that is being offset with revenue from the municipal transportation fund, so there would be no impact on the tax rate.
Right, and to note further, we've been in touch with the property owners, so if the owner, in fact, is approved to make changes in front of the planning board, we would hold any installation to coincide with a recalibration of where that crosswalk would be relative to the design of the revised plaza. but the developer indicates it's likely the changes would not occur until the spring of '26. At the same time, it takes quite a bit of time to get these things in stock, so we would hold, we wouldn't spend the money in '25 as long as the plaza project's moving forward. There's no tax rate impact, and this way we're sort of poised to move forward. And it does give us some leverage to work with the developer in terms of placement in what we're doing. If the money's not allocated, the developer doesn't have confidence we're actually going to move forward. And this was the recommendation of the traffic engineering study for Main Street crosswalk improvements that Durham and UNH undertook.
And that's what was being proposed as part of the Colonial Durham site plan application as well.
And just for some clarification though, if it's coming out of that, what other uses are there for that municipal transportation fee? Could some of that transportation fee fund be applied elsewhere in the budget?
Yes, we've done that in a few cases. We have some money allocated toward the bike share program, the CAT tracks. There was an allocation for this purpose. There was an allocation to offset the cost of sidewalk improvements for next year with tip downs and banding. I think that was a $40,000 amount. I'm looking to Gail to see if there's anything more. But all those items would come from the fund and not the tax rate.
2 4-handled EV chargers.
Yep, 2 4-handled EV chargers.
I guess I would like to propose an amendment to my motion, which is that to not only strike that line from the budget, but to also reallocate $30,000 from the municipal transportation fund towards a different part of the budget that would reduce the tax rate.
Well, there's sufficient balance in that municipal transportation fund to spend on another $30,000 on something else without making this reduction. It just, as I looked at the budget, I didn't see anything else that I thought was warranted, but you may have identified something.
Because the money needs to be spent on something in that category, because it's coming from that fund.
So,
Yes. There's a lot of
There's a lot of
flexibility.
other things. I mean, even applying it to, you think about the amount we spent on Madbury Road, and it has those new bump outs. And I don't know how much one of those bump outs costs, but that was a significant improvement in pedestrian safety. So if there's more locations for anything like that, or for safety along those roadways, I would say that those would be a huge benefit.
Do we have a second to this motion yet?
I seconded the motion, but not the amendment.
Okay. Is there a second to the
I'll second the
amendment?
amendment.
I just terrified. I mean, I've almost hit people coming out of there in the
The flashing lights aren't going to stop.
40 years, students don't even look up anymore. If sometimes you, and I'm really concerned about that. I think the new signaling we're getting now is helpful.
I think it's right in some of the congested areas, but I think until everything's completed, maybe 2026 is a more appropriate time. The other one, they put one in one spot on the road. It makes no sense at all. It's just a waste of money, but.
May I call the question?
Yes, you may. Would you like to start the vote?
This is on the amendment.
This is on the amendment.
Curtis Register, aye.
Darrell Ford, nay.
Eric Lund, nay.
Wayne Burton, nay.
Do you want to restate the amendment for Councilor Friedman? Thank you. Councilor Friedrich?
Sure, so the amendment was to not only strike the $30,000 flashing light from the budget, but to also instruct that that $30,000 from the municipal transportation fund be allocated elsewhere in the budget on an improvement that would reduce the tax rate. So a suggestion was made for the complete streets, for it to be applied instead to the complete streets project.
Thank you. Thank you. Joe Friedman, nay.
Sonia Dell, nay.
James Bubar, aye.
Heather Grant, aye.
So that's 3 in favor, 5 opposed. 6 opposed. Wait, 1,
4 in
2,
favor,
3,
5
4,
opposed. Or, yeah, I think that's right, because I voted aye, Lubar voted aye, Grant voted aye.
Em never voted.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Em, did Em have a chance to vote?
Oh, sorry, aye.
There you go.
That's it. So that's 4.
4 to
Okay.
5.
4 to 5. So it fails. So the amendment fails, but we're back to the original, which is reducing the 30,000 allocation for that blinking light.
Curtis Register,
Okay.
aye.
Darrell Ford, nay.
Eric Lund, nay.
Wayne Burton, nay.
Joe Friedman, nay.
Sonia Dell, nay.
James Bubar, nay.
I can't remember what I'm doing.
We're removing the 30,000. From the,
30,000
Oh,
for the
Heather
RFP.
Grant, aye. It's not like it matters.
M. Friedrichs, aye.
So it's 3 in favor and 6 opposed.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We are already adjourned, right?
We're at 10:45, so
So
No discussion.
no discussion goes with that. So, but we do vote. So would you like to start the vote?
Curtis Register, aye.
I'm not sure why we vote, but Darrell Ford, aye.
Eric Lund, aye.
Wayne Burton, aye.
Joe Friedman, nay.
Sonia Dell, nay.
James Bubar, aye.
Heather Grant, aye.
M. Friedrichs, aye.
So we continue this when we're
So we'll
reminded.
bring the council for the next meeting a resolution and a one-pager that outline where we are now.
Currently.
For approval, I would say, so.
Thank you.
This meeting is adjourned.
The reason I said I don't know why we're voting is because the motion was to extend the meeting until